The story begins in the year 2000 and something in a city with a large labyrinth in the center. Inside this place, there was a gigantic space full of bizarre and dangerous monsters, but it was also possible to find incredible treasures and magic items of great power. That's why many people threw themselves into the dungeon, dreaming of finding these items and getting rich. However, the deeper someone went, the more valuable the treasures were, and the greater the danger. The risk was so great that many adventures ended up meeting an unfortunate end at the claws of the beasts. Now we see a group of explorers cornered by a pack of fierce monsters. One of the creatures advances quickly, and one of the adventurers already accepts his fate. But suddenly, a powerful purple lightning bolt hits the creature head on and disintegrates it. The attack came from a special item, a type of horn that crackled with electrical energy. The two surviving adventurers look up, confused by what just happened. We then discover that the horn was used together with a luminous metal to create something new. At that moment, a young man with black hair appears holding a cannon made with these materials. The creature was defeated with a single shot, and the boy comments that the weapon is well worth the mana cost. He lands near the explorers, who thank him and ask him to take care of the rest of the beasts. Our protagonist then stands there with a blank expression, not understanding their entitled request. With this, the adventurer is startled by the boy's reaction and realizes the mistake he made. The young man ignores them and says he is only there for the materials because he needs to support his sister. Suddenly, the two men are terrified to see more monsters appearing on the cliffs. Soon, 3 new creatures climb down from the rocks, ready to attack the remaining group. The 2 cowards run away and beg for help, while our hero remains calm. His feet start to glow with a blue aura, and he prepares for action. One of the fleeing guys looks back in shock as he sees a red blur dash past him. The boy now wields a flaming sword and says he doesn't mind negotiating. He offers the giant weapon to the adventurers and asks how much they would pay for it. The scene shifts to our hero in a bedroom, and he comments on how cool it is to use magic in real life. It is revealed that the dungeon actually replicates the world of MMORPG called Fantasy Online. For some reason, the players this game could use their character's abilities inside it. Real-world weapons didn't work in the labyrinth, so this was an incredible advantage. All of this was possible thanks to a mysterious cube that suddenly appeared. With the cube in hand, our protagonist, Somasato, is ready to start his work as an artisan. This class was the only production class in the game, and because of that, it was highly looked down upon by the other players. The young man then takes the mysterious cube and a metal ingot to begin the crafting process. Then, the object begins to shine brightly as it melts the material to create a new item. He shares that his playstyle has always been focused solely on mastering the art of item creation. With a smug smile, the boy proudly shows off the sword he just forged. Suddenly, a holographic screen appears in front of him with a call from someone named Shika. He answers and is shocked to hear the person on the other end desperately asking for help. Shika is his younger sister and an explorer much stronger than him who had never asked for help before. This leaves him extremely worried, so he rushes out to find her as quickly as possible. He runs down a dark hallway, shouting his sister's name, but gets no response. The boy continues his desperate search, shouting for Shika in a huge empty hall. Suddenly, he hears a faint little voice calling his name and immediately stops running. At that moment, a tiny fairy appears and fearfully says she doesn't know what to do because she turned into a monster. The protagonist stands completely paralyzed and speechless upon seeing the little creature. Even the guards nearby start yelling in surprise at the scene. The little fairy explains that she passed out while exploring, and when she woke up, she looked like this. The boy then picks up the little creature in his hands with great care and affection. He decides to use his analysis skill to try to understand his sister's situation. This artisan skill is used to check the recipes of items and equipment, but it also works on players with negative statuses, showing the recipe for the cure. He hopes that if the transformation is a negative status, he can find a solution. However, when he uses the skill, the screen only shows static, and he thinks it won't work out. But amidst the confusing data, he manages to read a single clear line of text. The information says that the only cure for this transformation is the legendary Philosopher's Stone. This is an ultra-rare item in the game with several miraculous and highly powerful effects. If it's the Philosopher's Stone, then the cure for the transformation is practically guaranteed. The problem is that no one has ever found the stone, but he knows there is a recipe to craft it. However, the recipe requires extremely rare materials that are almost impossible to obtain. The only way out is to buy them, and the total cost for this is an absurd 100 million gold. Our protagonist is devastated by the price and thinks his profession is pathetic, but his sister immediately scolds him. The little fairy says that without his class, they wouldn't even know about the cure, so it's all thanks to his effort. With this, the boy is moved by the unexpected support, and a feeling of gratitude fills him. He thanks his sister by gently petting her head with his finger and regains his determination. Then, with renewed morale, he declares that they will gather every single material needed for the recipe, and with a confident smile, he says that, obviously, she will have to help with the mission too. The little fairy agrees excitedly and full of energy, as she completely trusts her brother. But right after, she asks the most important thing, which is how they are going to get the money. He replies that it's obvious, as they are simply going to hit the jackpot inside the labyrinth. Soon, they arrive at the mining area on the first floor of the dungeon, a place full of caves. The boy quickly notices that the place is full of beginner explorers and game newbies. Then, his sister curiously asks what he managed to create with the materials he had. He shows, with a smile on his face, that he managed to craft some small mining bombs. Nearby, some adventurers comment on how clueless someone must be to choose such a bad class. The group's leader is a mage named Ignis, who assumes that our hero must be a newbie. Sheikah becomes visibly annoyed by the mean comments, but her brother remains calm. The others continue their mockery, saying it's the first time they've seen an artisan in person. But our hero is already tired of hearing this same joke and isn't bothered by the insults. Seeing that her brother doesn't react, the little fairy gets angry and starts calling the group a bunch of idiots. The mage looks confused, wondering if that little creature is the boy's pet monster. Ignis then loses his patience and tries to hit the fairy with his staff to shut her up. However, his staff is stopped mid-air with extreme ease by a firm hand. Our protagonist blocks the attack, leaving the mage completely shocked by his absurd strength. The boy then shoots a threatening glare that sends shivers down the cocky mage's spine. Ignis is terrified by the pressure the artisan is emitting in that tense moment. Then, Soma tells the group of jerks to get out of the way, because they are very busy right now. Humiliated in front of his companions, the mage becomes furious and prepares a powerful spell. He shouts that the artisan will pay for his insolence and fires a blast of purple energy. The magic attack rushes toward our hero, creating a massive explosion. The mage comments that it was a waste to use a strong spell on trash like that artisan. But when the smoke clears, the mage is shocked to see that the artisan is completely unharmed. He doesn't understand a thing, as the flames mysteriously disappeared, and he wonders what happened. It is revealed that Soma combined a mining bomb with a simple bottle of water. With this, he created a water bomb with fire resistance that completely canceled out the spell. The boy then brags, saying it didn't turn out bad at all for an item crafted on the fly. The mage breaks into a cold sweat and is in disbelief at his opponent's ingenuity. He refuses to believe that such simple, low-level items stopped his powerful magic. So, to uncover the truth behind the trick, he decides to use his analysis skill. A blue magic circle appears in his eye and begins to scan the artisan's stats. Upon seeing the result, the mage and his companions are completely paralyzed with shock. Several screens with information pop up, and they wonder what level that player is. With a mocking smile, he replies that he is just a simple artisan, as they saw. The mage then screams in desperation that the boy's level is 999. Ignis can't believe it, as that is the maximum level, and it would be impossible for an artisan to reach. His companions are terrified and start doubting the victory of their arrogant leader. Ignis becomes furious at their doubt and refuses to accept such a humiliating defeat. He then unleashes all his power and creates a gigantic magic circle for a supreme spell. With a deafening roar, he casts the Earthbreaker magic to crush his enemy. The ground violently explodes, and huge chunks of rock are hurled towards Soma. but the artisan dodges the projectiles with surprising agility and without any difficulty. After the attack, the ground is completely destroyed, and our hero seems a bit annoyed. The mage starts laughing like a maniac and brags about mastering magic from all 4 elements, but suddenly, a dark hole opens behind him, and 2 yellow eyes emerge from the darkness. A gigantic and scary silhouette emerges from the hole, leaving the mage paralyzed. Little Shika is terrified by the mysterious creature's overwhelming presence. The protagonist then realizes that the idiot ended up opening a hole to the lower floors. With this, a colossal red dragon emerges from the hole, and now they have a big problem. Wasting no time, the monster prepares a massive fireball in its mouth to attack. It fires a devastating blast of flames that incinerates everything in its path. The mage screams in terror seeing the attack coming his way with no chance of escaping. The mage and his companions are engulfed by the flames and cry out as they fall into the hole. Our protagonist creates a water barrier to protect himself from the dragon's powerful attack. Shika desperately asks what they should do, and her brother laments the terrible start to their mission. He asks if she can use her scout skills, but she says that as a fairy, she has no strength. Soma explains that he just needs her to find the monster's weak point, and she agrees to help. He dodges another blast of fire, while his sister flies close to the dragon to analyze it. She activates her skill to reveal weak points, and several targets appear on the creature's body. After a quick search, she finds the exact spot at the base of the giant monster's tail. With the information, he runs to the spot and places the mining bomb on the weak point. The bomb explodes right on the dragon's tail, causing a massive explosion at the site. A shiny item is dropped from the monster's wound and falls to the ground right in front of him. The mage's companions watch from afar and are shocked that not even a shot to the eye worked. Our hero picks up the item and explains that all he needed was to hit the weak point with a critical strike. He then starts using his crafting skill to quickly combine several items. With a triple crafting skill, he fuses the materials at an impressive speed. An intense light surrounds the dragon as the new weapon is forged and materializes. A gigantic weapon called the Dragonic Pile Bunker then appears, a spear with serious firepower. The artisan faces the colossal dragon holding his new creation and prepares for the final attack. He charges forward and points the powerful spear right at the creature's chest. Apologizing, he says that the game is over and it's time to end that battle. An ammo casing is ejected from the weapon, signaling that the attack has been fired. The spear pierces the dragon's chest with overwhelming force, and the monster roars in pain. Soma then pulls the trigger again, and several bullets are fired from inside the spear. All the other players who were hiding are left completely speechless by the incredible scene. The boy just replies with a simple yes, and looks down at the huge hole in the ground. Down there, the mage begs for help as he is about to fall to a certain doom. He complains, saying he used up all his mana and has no way to save himself from that fall. Soma then creates a rope ladder and says he can help him, but on one condition. The mage gets desperate and apologizes profusely for his arrogance and ignorance. The boy explains that he won't leave him there, because that wouldn't bring him any profit. With a wicked smile, the boy demands that the mage hand over every last coin he has. He takes all the money, and the mage runs away while Soma waves goodbye, saying it was a pleasure doing business. After everything, he leans against the wall to rest a bit with his fairy sister by his side. But suddenly, the boy passes out and falls to the ground, leaving his sister completely desperate. He wakes up exhausted and complains that artisans really weren't made for direct combat. At that moment, 2 other explorers approach and say they were watching the battle from afar. One of them then shows interest in the dragonic weapon and asks if our hero would be willing to sell it. The man immediately offers 300,000 gold, and his companion accepts the sale without a second thought. Soma interrupts the deal and asks if the weapon is really worth that much to them. The explorer denies it and shows that the weapon has an enhancement of plus 99, something impossible to get. Besides, unlike the game, the real labyrinth can actually cost you your life, so no one would stay farming forever. Hearing the man's logic, our protagonist becomes thoughtful and analyzes the proposal more carefully. With a smirk, he finally agrees to the sale and closes the deal with the 2 of them. With the rescue reward in the sale, he gathers 470,000, but he is still far from his goal. The scene then shifts to a city with ancient architecture and several stone houses. While walking through the streets, the little fairy celebrates the 2 unexpected payouts they managed to get. She then asks what he was thinking about, and the boy says he just had a great idea. He suggests they give up on making money by exploring the dungeon honestly, and Sheikah is left in shock. She argues that they barely handled a dragon and would meet a quick end on the lower floors. He interrupts her, showing the crafting cube, and says they have an advantage. With a confident smile, he holds up a sword and reminds her that they have item crafting. Upon understanding the plan, the little fairy gets excited, and her eyes shine with the new possibility. She realizes that in the real world, there is a huge demand for crafted items, unlike in the game. But he says it's no use selling cheap junk, and that they need something that sells for a good price. His sister doubts they'll find something like that, but the boy confidently states they can, because, according to him, there is a place made exactly for that, and they are right in front of it. Wasting no time, our protagonist pushes the gigantic doors open and enters the mysterious place. He explains that this is where the most gold changes hands in the entire Phantom Labyrinth. An intense light shines from inside the building as the doors open completely. The place is actually a massive legendary auction house where rare items are traded. Inside the auction, several valuable items are sold for tens of thousands of gold rapidly. Sheikah is amazed by the amounts, but her brother explains that it's normal for the biggest auction in the labyrinth. A rare earring is sold for 90,000, and the auctioneer strikes the gavel to close the bid. Our protagonist then says with a wicked smile that the real show is about to begin right now. The next item is a black shield called Dark Aegis, with a starting bid of 100,000 gold. The value rises quickly with several bids, reaching 400,000 in a matter of seconds. A rich blonde woman places a bid of 550,000 and looks confident in winning. The auctioneer then ends the auction, and the shield is sold for that impressive amount. With a determined look, Soma says that their next crafting target is that very shield. He explains that if there are so many people willing to pay top dollar, it means there is high demand. The plan is to mass produce the shield and sell it to everyone who lost the auction. With an evil smile, he already imagines the absurd profit they will make with this strategy. To craft the Dark Aegis, they need 2 rare materials, black diamond and fire dragon blood. They already got the blood from the fight against the dragon, as it was a weaker version of the material. To get the black diamond, they need to go down to the 2nd floor of the labyrinth. That was the initial plan, but the boy takes advantage of the fact that some explorers are out of mana to make a profit. He offers one of his mana potions to one of them, knowing they can't progress without it. With a greedy smile, he charges 1,000 gold for the potion, and the guy complains about the ridiculous price. Since they were there, the boy thought it would be a good idea to squeeze some change out of the other explorers. The plan worked so well that he got carried away and started selling several other useful items. An explorer complains about the price of an item to disarm traps, but Soma says it's fair. After all, with that item, they can bypass the traps without any risk of getting hurt. With this, a small bidding war starts among the explorers desperate for the items. But suddenly, little Sheikah notices something strange and calls her brother's attention. She screams in terror, pointing at something approaching quickly down the hallway. A pack of wolves with flames on their backs appears out of nowhere, running toward them. All the explorers panic and scream in terror upon seeing the horde of monsters. The boy gets distracted by the negotiation and now has to run away so he doesn't become Wolf Chow. He runs desperately down the hall while the hungry wolves chase him relentlessly. The monsters stay hot on their heels, and the situation becomes increasingly dangerous for everyone there. Sheikah suggests defeating them, but her brother says there are too many and the explosion could hit her. They end up in a dead end and are cornered by the pack of furious wolves. With a confident smile, the boy grabs his crafting cube and decides it's time to fight. He crafts a giant war hammer and prepares to smash all the monsters at once. The boy shouts that in a tight spot like that, it doesn't matter how many there are, he can take them all down with a powerful strike. he smashes the ground and releases a blue energy shockwave. The wave sweeps through the hallway and defeats all the wolves at once, clearing the path. He then asks if his sister is okay, and she says yes, and that the spot was perfect. But before they can continue, the ground starts to shake and crack beneath their feet. The attack was so strong that it destroyed the floor, and our protagonist falls into the hole that opened up. He yells in surprise as he plummets into the darkness of the floor below. After a long fall, he lands on a pile of rubble, a bit dazed. A beam of light illuminates the place through the hole in the ceiling, showing where he is. The boy realizes it was a really dumb move, and that he could have met his end if it weren't for the HP system. He then remembers the mage and feels embarrassed for copying his idiotic move. Suddenly, his sister comes flying down the hole and calls out to him, worried about his condition. She asks if he is okay, and he thanks the hit point system for saving him. Shika asks where they are, and the boy decides to create a light source to investigate. With his cube, he crafts a magic lantern that emits a warm, golden light. With the lantern in hand, he says he is ready to see what awaits them in the darkness. Upon lighting up the place, he is shocked to see that they are in some kind of ancient laboratory. He says that, in game terms, it looks like ancient and mysterious ruins. The place is made of metal and has a futuristic look quite different from the rest of the labyrinth. The advanced technology of the place makes it clear that something very different happened there. The little fairy is amazed by the discovery and calls her brother over to look at something. He turns around and is shocked to see a huge deactivated giant robot in the middle of the room. The boy recognizes the machine as a raid boss from the game, from the Grand Gignal series. He is impressed that the labyrinth managed to recreate even such a specific boss. From its design, he deduces that it is Grand Gignal Eve, one of the most difficult variants. His sister asks what they should do, and the boy replies that this is a good question. Then, the protagonist holds out his hand, asking his little sister to wait a second so he can check the machine up close. With an excited smile on his face, the boy remembers that this boss is very famous for dropping super valuable items. But the little fairy panics, warning him of the danger, while our hero is already climbing on the monster, telling her to relax. So, crouching on the metallic scrap, the young artisan gives a super confident look, ready to tinker with the machine. Wasting no time, he reaches for a strange glowing green button on the robot's armor and presses it. At that moment, the metal shell starts making sounds, completely startling our protagonist, who jumps back. Soon, a front hatch opens, releasing a lot of steam, and he drops to the ground, yelling for his sister to step back quickly. Panting, the boy stares at the strong green light coming from inside the machine and breathes a sigh of relief for narrowly escaping. With this, the atmosphere becomes super tense, and he breaks into a cold sweat while the little fairy hides terrified behind a wall. Through the dense smoke, a glowing female silhouette begins to emerge, leaving the young man completely clueless. Then, a beautiful robotic doll with a humanoid body is revealed, surrounded by several cables on her back, and with her eyes closed. Then, the scene cuts directly to the outside of the labyrinth, showing a beautiful sunny day over a large house. Inside the place, we see a broom sweeping the wooden floor while someone complains that everything there is too dirty. Wearing a classic maid outfit, the person indignantly asks if the owners of the house don't usually clean up. We discover that the cleaner is the robotic doll herself, who sighs, saying that her new master is quite a handful, but she quickly adds that this makes the job more rewarding, while our hero just scratches his head in total confusion. With an expression of pure exhaustion, the boy looks at his little sister, wondering how on earth the situation got to this point. At that moment, a short flashback takes us back to the dungeon, right at the time the beautiful android woke up. The machine simply disconnected from all the cables holding it and crashed onto the floor, surprising the artisan. Som explains that this terrible raid boss is made up of a giant shell and has a humanoid-shaped core. The metallic girl then starts to get up in a very bizarre way, and he was almost certain the fight would be worse than the dragons. So, already prepared for the worst, he pulled out his crafting cube, bringing up the virtual screen that showed his max level. However, the dangerous machine's glowing eye just focused on the boy and quickly registered his player name in the system. and to the utter shock of the two siblings, the robotic voice simply announced that it was registering him as its newest master. With that, we return to the present, where the young man explains that, bizarrely, the robot lost any memory of being an enemy monster. We see the dedicated android frantically dusting the wall while he laments that he couldn't stop the girl from following them. Relentless against dirt, she organizes the heavy metal ingots and cleans the books scattered across the messy desk in the room. Then, the little fairy agrees with the maid, saying he is disorganized, and the boy yells in annoyance, asking them not to badmouth him. The unusual maid calmly asks to be called Eve, and our hero freaks out, saying she is a huge mystery in their lives. Finally, he takes a deep breath and tells Eve to take care of the house because he and his sister are going back to the labyrinth to forge the valuable shield. The boy and the robot stare at each other in an awkward silence for a few moments. The android then gives a respectful bow and wishes them both a safe return, while the young man feels totally awkward. Already walking down the labyrinth's huge stone staircase, the protagonist wonders why the machine decided to act like a simple cleaner. The boy deduces that the monster's original lore in the game must be influencing her actions, and the little fairy gets super curious about this theory. The artisan shares that in the game's story, these machines were highly advanced robots, and their new ally served as the maid of an ancient princess. Given that, it would make a lot of sense for her to return to this docile personality after losing her memory, but he prefers to leave the big mystery aside for now. Their main focus right now is just collecting the items to forge the Black Shield, until something unexpected completely catches our hero's attention. Walking down the dark hallway, he runs into a large group of explorers and immediately recognizes a very specific person among them. Quickly, the artisan calls the silver, armored man by the name Oliver, revealing that the warrior is a paladin-class player. Hearing his name called, the gray-haired warrior turns around with a very serious expression to see who was talking to him there in the dungeon. One of the allies asks if he knows the boy, and Oliver quickly confirms, saying the kid is a huge weirdo who maxed out a useless class. Our protagonist gets very offended, complaining that he had his reasons for that, but another group member mocks him, saying he admitted to being weird. Totally ignoring the joke, the paladin seriously warns his allies to never underestimate the artisan and to not even think about picking a fight with him. The veteran explains that the young man's base stats would crush anyone in the group in the blink of an eye, leaving the newbies there sweating cold. Right then, a little girl dressed as a witch eagerly raises her hand and asks if the two experienced players were actually great friends. The two answer together in perfect sync, denying the friendship and claiming they barely know each other, proving that deep down they get along really well. Quickly changing the subject, the armored warrior looks at the young man and asks where the famous sister who always stuck by his side was. The boy just lets out a long sigh and points to his back, showing the little fairy who was hiding and paying attention to the whole conversation. He introduces the tiny creature as the girl, and the paladin says it's hard to believe, but it made sense that she had turned into a weak little monster. The knight jokes that the other option would be that the young man had lost his mind and adopted a pet just like her, making the artisan threaten to sue him for defamation. Already turning his back, the gray-haired man warns that he has no time to help with the bizarre problem because he needs to train his new team of rookies on the lower floors. Before leaving, however, the veteran comments on how exhausting it must be to farm 100 million gold coins just to cure the little girl. The warrior recalls a conversation where the protagonist revealed that the two had no blood ties, yet he was still moving mountains to save her now. With a very gentle and sincere smile on his face, the young artisan replies that he would obviously do everything to save the girl without a second thought. To prove it, he squishes the fairy's cheek in a really cute hug, declaring that she is his precious little sister, while the tiny one screams for help. At that moment, a sad flashback shows the protagonist as a child, crying in front of a grave in the pouring rain after losing his beloved parents. The sad boy found himself completely alone with no relatives to help him in that painful moment, until a transparent umbrella covered his head. As if a true miracle had happened, the dark clouds began to part, revealing warm rays of sunlight brightening up all that darkness. The little orphan lifts his wet, tear-filled face, totally shocked by that unexpected presence that appeared to comfort his pain. We then see little Shika's parents, smiling very warmly, deciding to adopt the lonely boy simply because they were great friends with his old family. The boy explains that the welcoming family accepted him with open arms, simply out of consideration for his late parents. Then, the couple's little daughter peeked at the new resident timidly, hiding behind the hallway door. Being a very quiet and shy little girl, she approached slowly and soon accepted the boy as her true older brother. As time passed, the two built a very strong bond, playing together and having a lot of fun around the house. And this created beautiful happy memories of the protagonist carrying the girl on his back with big smiles on their faces. Returning to the present, the young man is pulled from his thoughts upon hearing his little sister's voice calling him from afar. He then turns around and sees the little fairy flying excitedly toward him in the middle of a cave full of glowing blue crystals. Celebrating a lot, the tiny creature announces that she found a gigantic chunk of the rare black diamond. The artisan pets her head, praising the excellent scouting job the tiny companion did. At that moment, the boy makes a silent promise, guaranteeing that he will do whatever it takes to return that girl's normal body. Further ahead, they spot huge poisonous green lizards, and the protagonist calculates that he could take down a few of them alone. However, the big problem was a giant purple mutant variant that would give even the skilled paladin a headache. The little fairy gets worried about the monster's strength, and the young man confirms that the beast's base stats are absurd. Making matters worse, they find one of the rookies from the other team lying on the ground, suffering from a poison that ignores magic healing. The little girl asks desperately if they can help, but the boy says that without the right materials, it's impossible to create an antidote. He quickly hands over a simple health potion to ease the boy's pain, regretting that he can't question him in that state. With a serious look, the protagonist realizes that something went very wrong and that they will also need to go down to investigate. Being the only available path, they reach a massive hole with rope ladders and decide to follow the tracks of the other group. Wasting no time, the little fairy flies down first to scout ahead, while her brother tells her to be very careful. Confident, the tiny scout says she needs to be useful somehow and dives into the darkness of the huge cave. But upon reaching the bottom, she gets a huge scare when she notices something terrible taking over the whole environment. A dense, toxic purple mist covered the bottom of the place, and the girl decides to head back quickly to warn about the danger. Back on the surface, the young man asks if she saw any sign of the knight or the other lost kids. The little girl denies it, while the boy deduces that the veteran warrior must be managing well using his purification skills. He concludes that fighting the mutant creature head on in the middle of that poisonous smoke would be outright suicide. Scared, the girl suggests they give up on that area and look for the diamonds somewhere safer. But the artisan points to the rocks around a lava river, explaining that trying to explore blindly would be much worse. According to him, the safest plan is to sneak in right under the beast's nose to grab exactly what they need. The tiny girl questions how they would get past the poisonous mist, and the hero just touches her, claiming he already has a genius plan. Completely startling his little companion, the boy shows off a shiny metal tweezer, warning that he will need to borrow something from her. The little girl panics, wondering what he just stole from her as the boy holds a flask full of fairy scales. The artisan ignores the girl's panic and explains that this magic dust is one of the best protection items in the game, capable of creating something very useful right now. With a confident smile, he fuses the materials using the cube and quickly crafts a special piece of equipment called a protective scarf. The hero puts the fabric over his face, explaining that the item doesn't cure poison, but is more than enough to block the effects of that dense mist. Then, the duo watches from afar as the purple smoke covers the entire floor, and the protagonist comments that the situation in there is quite intense. So, with the tiny girl sheltered inside the scarf, the young man asks her to take over navigation, and the little scout bravely accepts the mission. But suddenly, a loud rumble echoes through the place, and the boy is startled to see the powerful paladin being thrown out of the poisonous mist. with full force. The gray-haired warrior slides across the ground, trying to defend himself with his shield, and is totally shocked by the brutal force he just took. At that moment, the terrible giant mutant beast emerges from the darkness, roaring frighteningly right in front of the fallen veteran. Giving him no chance to breathe, the immense purple lizard attacks with its tail, and the knight can barely withstand the devastating impact using his shield. Then, the warrior notices our hero's presence nearby and feels super embarrassed to be seen in such a pathetic and desperate situation. However, knowing the imminent danger, he decides to swallow his pride and screams, begging the young artisan to help him out of that nightmare. The knight quickly explains that they can create a powerful antidote if they manage to rip out the poison gland from the giant monster itself. The protagonist sighs in annoyance at the man's audacity to ask for favors right now and reminds him that the group's mage could also create the serum. But the veteran points to the side, showing that all of his rookie allies were already completely knocked out by the poison spread in the air. With tears of despair, the paladin shouts that he can't let those kids meet a bad end and promises to pay any amount for the boy's help. Hearing the magic word involving money, the young man changes his attitude instantly and breaks into a wicked smile, really liking that proposal. The artisan declares that a generous payment changes the whole story and quickly summons his magic cube, agreeing to close the deal with the warrior. Sweating cold while holding off the beast's attack, the veteran expresses his immense gratitude, totally relieved to get that player's support. With renewed hope, the knight summons a glowing aura, activating one of his protective skills to hold the boss's attention. The giant monster attacks furiously using its heavy claws, but the paladin bravely holds his ground, going head to head with the monstrous creature. The purple beast notices the warrior's resistance, and its huge red eye glows with pure rage, ready to unleash an even more lethal strike. Then, the creature opens its huge mouth and fires an extremely concentrated blast of poisonous energy straight against the veteran's shield. Without stepping back, the experienced player shouts as he activates his supreme barrier and creates a gigantic blue light shield to withstand the devastating attack. The impact generates a colossal explosion of energy, where the purple blast tries to pierce the sacred barrier, creating a huge clash of forces on the spot. Taking advantage of the opening from the impact, the warrior jumps very high, wielding a glowing mace, and prepares to counterattack with all his might. The knight comes down like a meteor and lands a powerful blow right on the mutant creature's face, trying to disorient the fearsome giant lizard. Right after, the paladin lets out a battle cry and throws a strange glowing metal device right in the middle of the furious beast's face. Our hero watches everything with a mocking smile and tells the monster to enjoy the present, revealing that the item is a strong flashbang. The artifact explodes violently, creating a blinding flash that lights up the entire dark cave and leaves the fearsome lizard completely disoriented. The warrior screams at the top of his lungs, using all his strength to keep fighting the monster. Then the bomb goes off right in the giant lizard's face, creating a blinding flash that leaves it stunned. With this, the boy sneaks away with his sister, while the paladin shouts that he is counting on him for the serum. But the veteran spots a huge shadow appearing and is startled to see the beast's tail coming his way. Unable to dodge, the knight is violently crushed against the ground by the mutant monster's brutal strike. At that moment, the creature's huge red eye starts glowing brightly again, revealing that the light no longer has any effect. The little fairy panics, warning that the lizard found them, and the young man replies tensely that he already noticed that. With that, the artisan curses in frustration, realizing that the light explosion drew all of the beast's attention onto him. He quickly tries to use his crafting cube to defend himself, while the beast fires another blast of poisonous energy. However, the purple ray hits the boy's hand head-on, canceling his skill and making him step back in pain. The little fairy screams in terror as she sees the monster's huge shadow covering them, ready to devour them at once. But suddenly, a golden flash falls from the sky like lightning, striking the giant lizard's head directly. The two siblings are completely paralyzed with shock, seeing that electrical attack appearing out of nowhere. The powerful magic smashes the mutant creature into the ground, kicking up a lot of dust and causing a loud rumble in the place. Then, our protagonist widens his eyes, sweating cold as he tries to figure out who just saved their lives. Amidst the clearing mist, a female silhouette with glowing eyes appears, leaving the young man completely speechless. The boy immediately recognizes that shape and mutters Eve's name, impressed by the robot's imposing presence. The mysterious android remains motionless, floating lightly over the defeated body of the terrible purple beast. Very confused, the hero wonders what she is doing there, while the maid gracefully kneels in front of him. At that moment, the artisan panics, thinking the machine had regained its memories as an enemy raid boss. He realizes that it would be impossible to win a battle against her in that state, and prepares for the worst. Closing his eyes, the boy cowers, expecting to take a fatal blow from the powerful ancient android. But to everyone's surprise, the robot simply holds out her hand, offering a red piece of his own equipment. The young man opens his eyes, totally clueless, asking in confusion if that really belonged to him. With her usual calm voice, Eve replies that she traveled all the way there just to return the item her master had forgotten. The artisan stammers his thanks, while the android proudly states that this is just part of her duties as a maid. Then, the protagonist finally notices that the red strap from his own suspenders was actually missing. Laughing nervously, he sincerely thanks her, saying he hadn't even noticed his clothes got torn during the rush. The robot just stares at him with a neutral expression as he says he was going to leave the broken item at home to fix later. Finally, the loyal maid asks them to always trust her, while the little fairy lands on her hand, thanking her for the incredible help. The giant mutant beast gets up, roaring furiously and displaying all its terrifying size before the small group gathered there. Then, the robot maid steps in front of her master, extending her arm, and announces that she will handle this situation personally. She calmly explains that eliminating any insolent creature that threatens the artisan is also part of her daily duties. Enraged by the interruption, the purple lizard attacks brutally, using its heavy claws against the new opponent. But to everyone's surprise, the tin girl blocks that colossal impact using only one hand, and without stepping back a single inch. With this, the creature's huge eye shows visible shock upon seeing its strike stopped so easily. Wasting no time, the monster opens its mouth and fires a concentrated jet of that lethal poison directly at the fearless android. The little fairy panics, fearing for their ally, but the young man tells her to relax since toxins don't affect a purely mechanical body. Emerging unharmed from the poisonous smoke, the protector casts a cold, piercing glare, focusing entirely on eliminating the target. Then, with a simple motion, she pushes the gigantic paw upward, generating an absurd shockwave that throws the lizard off balance. Taking advantage of the opening, the robot dashes forward at surreal speed, closing the distance in a fraction of a second. With surgical precision, the warrior lands an incredibly heavy punch right on the beast's face, creating small explosions upon impact. The force of the blow is so overwhelming that the huge creature is thrown backward, completely unable to react to this punishing combo. At that moment, the agile maid spots the enemy's tail coming her way and prepares to dodge without showing any effort. Suddenly, the gray-haired knight charges forward, screaming at the top of his lungs that he won't allow the monster to make another move. Taking the lead, the veteran lands a devastating shield bash on the beast's body, unleashing all his holy power in a massive flash. Working as a team, the tiny scout uses her hands like a lens and immediately activates her skill to reveal weak points. The magic sight focuses right on the back of the mutant lizard's neck, indicating exactly where the fighting duo should concentrate all their attacks. However, watching the fight from afar, the boy deduces that the damage they deal still won't be enough to take the boss down for good. He analyzes that the paladin class focuses on defense, while the android's melee strikes lack greater destructive power. Seeing the fallen rookies, the artisan considers focusing first on crafting the antidote, but realizes that just 2 more warriors wouldn't change anything. Wasting no time, our protagonist makes a bold decision, grabbing his glowing magic cube and calling the knight's attention. The gray-haired man turns around, completely confused as he hears the boy demand that he hand over absolutely all the valuable items in his inventory. Annoyed but out of options, the warrior opens his system screen, while the young man promises to craft a weapon capable of annihilating the beast. Confident, the hero says victory is guaranteed, since he has the best maid in the world by his side, watching his back. The artifact starts glowing brightly, fusing the delivered materials, and the creator quickly throws the new equipment to his ally. With a strong throw, he sends the newly forged weapon tearing through the air straight into the nimble robot's hands on the front line. The expert warrior jumps and grabs the large golden pole mid-air, demonstrating perfect sync with her master's intentions. Immediately, a sharp yellow energy flows from the equipment, transforming the item into a blade of pure, highly sharp, and lethal light. Finishing the combat masterfully, the android delivers a monumental strike, slicing the beast from bottom to top with a devastating flash. Then, the robotic maid channels an absurd amount of energy into the giant sword, ready to deliver the final blow. So, with a precise and lethal motion, she brings the glowing blade down, cutting through the air with impressive force. The strike completely crushes the mutant creature, splitting its body with an overwhelming flash of light. At that moment, the agile warrior lands gracefully on the monster's shell, while the energy from the attack dissipates. With this, the beast's body cannot withstand the extreme damage and starts to disintegrate in a burst of glowing energy. Thus, the loyal android lands on the rocky ground, completing her mission of perfectly protecting her master. The impact of the battle was so massive that the cave floor is left totally destroyed and covered in cracks all around her. Holding the glowing poison core in her hands, the Tin Girl announces in her calm voice that the task is complete. Then, the young man and the paladin walk over, impressed, toward the huge crater left in the middle of the battlefield. Fortunately, the antidote worked, and we see the two rookies sitting on the ground recovering, while the little fairy celebrates their success. The artisan hands another vial of serum to one of the injured warriors, making sure everyone is completely cured. With the team saved, the gray-haired knight and his allies celebrate the victory, sincerely thanking the duo for their valuable help. But with all this mess sorted out, the protagonist just breathes a sigh of relief to finally have a moment of peace. The boy then looks at his mechanical guardian, expressing his deep gratitude for her risking everything to protect them. He mentions that he forged that equipment right on the spot because he knew they needed the highest firepower possible to win. The tiny little sister starts teasing the boy, saying he gets blushy and is never honest about his true feelings. Feeling very awkward, the protagonist points his finger, stating that if she is going to be his maid, she needs to help in the fights too. A robotic girl just listens to her master's complaints, maintaining her usual neutral and professional expression. Then she gives a slight bow, promptly accepting the orders and reaffirming her total loyalty to the young artisan. At that moment, a system screen pops up, showing the absurd profits they made, adding up the sales in the rescue reward. The system also confirms the gathering of several black diamonds and the monster's rare core, although they are still far from their money goal. But the best reward of all was the notification confirming that the powerful mechanical doll officially joined the party. The scene shifts to a huge, luxurious mansion far away, showing that something important is about to happen. Inside the place, a suited man approaches, reporting that he brings urgent news about our skilled protagonist. A mysterious blonde woman listens to it all with a smile on her face, finding this simple crafter's skills quite interesting. But back to our hero, we see the front of his humble home on a beautiful sunny day after that tiring battle. Inside, two bald adventurers are left with their jaws dropping, admiring the powerful black shield enhanced to the maximum level. Without hesitation, one of the men hands over a heavy bag containing 400,000 gold coins to pay for the valuable equipment. The young artisan receives the payment with a greedy smile and asks them to let him know if they need more rare items. With the customers laughing and agreeing, the boy realizes that his crafting plan is yielding a true fortune for them. The boy explains that he chose to sell the items to mid-level explorers who lost the big auction. He shares that selling directly cuts out the auction house fees and also helps build a good list of loyal clients for future business. With a very sly smile, the artisan shows a list of equipment, saying he can get almost anything they want. Then, the boy shows off the incredible poisonous longbow, revealing that this special model was forged with the mutant lizard's core. The adventurers drool over the super rare weapon, but quickly start sweating cold, knowing the price of that thing would empty their pockets. However, one of them mentions that there will be a hunters gathering in the forest tomorrow, and many would give anything for a bow of that level. The bold guy then asks for priority on buying rare weapons in exchange for this valuable info, and our protagonist accepts the deal on the spot. The scene shifts to the luxurious guild house, showing a clear sky after this highly profitable negotiation. Walking calmly through the courtyard, the young man is surprised by a familiar voice calling him from afar. The little fairy flies excitedly toward him, wanting to know about the sales, and he replies with a smile that everything was an absolute success. The crafter displays the holographic screens, showing that they sold 2 shields and made an absurd profit of 750,000 gold. But then we notice something large strapped with leather to the back of someone accompanying the hero. It was the dedicated android, effortlessly carrying a gigantic backpack while commenting on the success of their sales. The tiny scout jumps for joy, calculating that with the other items and potions, they can hit 3 million in no time. However, the robotic maid quickly ruins the mood, reminding them that the final goal is 100 million and that this pace is still too slow. The boy agrees with his guardian but breaks into a cunning smile, revealing he already has the next big step planned out to make more profit. He decides to keep the secret for later, focusing on selling the current stock, while the machine simply follows her master's orders. The artisan holds up the imposing poison bow, claiming he already has buyers in mind and that he'll use this to fatten up their budget. Later, we see the giant tree that served as a safe meeting point for the hunters of that floor. The boy set up a large stall, displaying a full arsenal packed with strong arrows and essential potions for any hunter. Our hero announces his products to the crowd, with the robot by his side, helping to draw the attention of all the adventurers there. With that classic wicked smile, he announces that the main highlight of the day is about to be revealed. The boy holds up the glowing purple bow, leaving all the hunters completely amazed, as they had never seen anything like it up close. Aiming at a specific customer, the protagonist tries to bait him, saying that weapon would perfectly match his level. The archer gets super nervous, sweating cold, and tries to give a lame excuse to avoid closing the deal right away. The artisan is confused when the men start looking away and refusing to buy, even though they're drooling over the rare equipment. The boy complains mentally that not even the basic items are selling, while the crowd just watches without the guts to spend. The adventurers start whispering to each other, pointing at the boy's stall with very suspicious and hesitant expressions. The crafter stomps his foot in annoyance, realizing the guys seem afraid of facing some retaliation if they buy anything from his shop. In this moment of pure tension, a huge hunter emerges from the crowd and yells, calling our protagonist a string bean. The arrogant hunter approaches yelling, asking who gave the young man permission to open a shop right there in his territory. Showing zero interest, our hero simply stares at the big guy with a look of pure boredom in the face of all that yelling. With the utmost calm, the boy states that he doesn't recognize the guy's face and asks who he thinks he is to talk like that. Totally ignoring the bully's swagger, the young man introduces himself as a simple artisan and asks if the big guy wants to buy anything. Hearing the boy's class, the hunter bursts out laughing along with his goons, mocking the fact that he has such a useless profession. The protagonist thinks it's been a while since he saw a reaction like this, while the little fairy gets furious at the group's attitude. Thinking he's all that, the brute tells the crowd it's much better to buy the weapons he crafts himself than the boy's garbage. Then the hero realizes this guy has been intimidating customers and monopolizing the area's profits, stopping anyone else from selling. The young man then explains that other classes can also forge basic equipment, as long as it's within their specialties. Suddenly, our protagonist gets a dumbfounded look, totally outraged as he processes the audacity of that cocky guy. The android asks what this hunter's own creations would be, and the artisan deduces they must just be weak, super common weapons. Hearing the boy's mockery, the bully gets furious, and a vein pops near his eye, showing he's lost his patience. Bellowing in rage, the huge guy declares the young man has a lot of nerve and warns that he's gonna crush him right there, must teach him a good lesson. At that moment, the hero raises his magic cube with a confident smile and proposes a challenge where the loser gets permanently banned. Provoking his opponent even more, the boy calls him a coward for only wanting to fight when the rules are totally in his favor. Frothing with anger, the hunter glares at the boy with a terrifying look and agrees to put his own stay in the forest on the line. The wind blows hard across the wooden deck as the artisan and his loyal maid watch their opponents step back for the challenge. Taking a big leap backward, the bully smiles sadistically and states he will accept all the terms proposed by the boy, but he adds a cruel condition, saying that if he wins, he will leave the young man severely injured and totally unable to walk. The brute explains the duel's rules, where both must craft a bow and arrow at the same time, and whoever hits the other first wins. Starting the fight, the hunter activates his crafting skills, forming a glowing piece of equipment, and promises to show the difference between them. However, the arrogant man's confidence vanishes in the blink of an eye, and he is completely shocked as he witnesses his rival's skill. Using his mysterious cube, the protagonist generates an energy tornado around himself, crafting a colossal bow that surprises the entire crowd. Wielding his new and powerful legendary weapon, the boy flashes a victorious look, making it clear the challenge was over before it even started. Sighing in exhaustion, the artisan complains that he was forced to use a client's super rare materials just to shut that idiot up. With the dispute settled, a strong gust of wind sways the giant treetops, showing that calm is returning to that floor. Hiding high up on a huge branch, the defeated hunter watches the people below, fuming with hatred for being publicly humiliated. Taking a deep breath to contain his fury, the bully swears he won't let things stay like this and prepares his revenge against the young man. With a desperate shout, the big guy unleashes a very intense green aura and activates a dangerous skill to summon wild beasts. Far away, our hero notices a strange change in the air and turns around suspiciously, sensing that something very bad is about to happen. Suddenly, several wild beasts with glowing eyes start falling from the sky, terrifying everyone at the location. The crowd falls into total panic seeing that bizarre cloud of monsters rapidly descending toward the wooden deck. Chaos instantly breaks out, and the adventurers scream desperately to run away while the monsters begin to attack. At that moment, our agile android springs into action and protects the people by blocking an attack from a huge mutant bear. The protector asks what's going on, and the protagonist notes that these creatures are too coordinated for a random attack. With this, the boy quickly deduces that all this mess is the doing of that arrogant hunter who wanted revenge at any cost. The artisan realizes that causing panic is just part of the plan and sees that all of this is nothing but a huge distraction. Analyzing the situation closely, the boy concludes that the villain's true target must be hiding somewhere else. Then, the young man's expression quickly changes as he notices an attack coming his way, and he braces for impact. Confirming his suspicions, he manages to block a sneaky arrow using a small energy shield right on time. But soon after, the danger escalates when a veritable rain of glowing arrows starts falling upon them. The boy jumps back, dodging the projectiles, while the little fairy desperately warns that the shooter is very far away. Without retreating, our hero draws his forged bow and fires blasts of blue energy to intercept the attacks in mid-air. The enemy arrows and the energy arrows violently collide in the air, creating an impressive light show. Far away, the cowardly shooter gives a smug smile, thinking he has the total upper hand in the battle. We discover it was the humiliated big guy, hiding on a distant branch, calmly firing with his weapon. He keeps shooting his glowing projectiles non-stop, thinking he's the master of the situation for attacking from afar. The villain mocks the artisan, calling him useless for supposedly not knowing about the loss of power in ranged attacks. With a crazy look on his face, the brute brags that his advanced class has a special skill to nullify that weakness. He explains that his supreme combat style is to trap enemies with the unleashed beasts and finish off the target from a safe distance. Laughing like a true maniac, the hunter prepares a gigantic explosive arrow to end the fight once and for all. But suddenly, the shooter's eyes widen completely as he notices a lethal, intense flash heading his way. Colossal blast of energy hits the tree directly, creating a devastating explosion that instantly swallows the villain. The big guy plummets from the sky, terrified by the force of the shot, and tries to convince himself that his vitality will withstand the impact. However, the guy falls into absolute panic when he sees that the projectiles falling around him are tied with lit dynamites. A colossal explosion of fire lights up the entire sky, ending the cowardly hunter's run in a very humiliating way. Far away, we see the young crafter holding his beautiful golden bow, while watching the smoke from the enemy's defeat. With a very mocking smile, the hero asks if that idiot really thought he was going to fight fair and square. The crowd in the background cheers for their salvation, while one of the adventurers bows, immensely thanking the boy for protecting them. The boy replies that buying out his stock is already a great way to say thanks, while the robot is surrounded by customers desperate for items. The young artisan wonders if this banishment isn't just empty words and asks what stops that villain from simply going back there. Then, a gray-haired adventurer smiles, agreeing with the boy, and says that's exactly the big reason he needs to ask for a very important favor. The scene then cuts to reveal the enormous, majestic tree with its beautiful leaves shining brightly under the light that illuminates that entire area of the forest. The gray-haired man explains that this hall wasn't part of the original labyrinth, but was actually a safe base built by the adventurers themselves. He shares that, in the past, 10 high-level hunters joined forces to build the place and acted as fair administrators, keeping the peace there. But unfortunately, they disappeared one by one until only that cowardly shooter was left, who used his admin power to monopolize absolutely everything. That's how the villain managed to take over the floor's only base, and our hero fully understands, as system privileges are truly absurd. The gray-haired man reveals a tense rumor, saying the other founders didn't just vanish out of nowhere, but were taken out by the big guy, leaving the two siblings shocked. With this, the protagonist cuts to the chase, asking what their mission would be, while the man simply apologizes for the delay and points ahead. They arrive in front of that gigantic glowing plant from before, and the adventurer introduces it as the immense, sacred tree of that entire region. Then, the man surprises everyone by begging the young artisan to use that huge magic plant as material to forge a new safe base for them. The client argues that by moving the location, the shooter will lose control, and they might even be able to block him from entering the new camp for good. The little fairy gets super worried about whether her brother can handle such a colossal project alone, but the boy confidently assures them the task is possible. However, flashing his classic mercenary face, the hero rubs his fingers together, warning that to accept such a heavy job, the reward must be gigantic. Without hesitation, the man agrees excitedly, revealing that all the hunters pooled their savings, adding up to an impressive 5 million gold coins. Upon hearing about this fortune, the young man's eyes shine with pure greed, and he immediately summons his powerful magic cube to start the big job. The client panics, thinking it's madness to start the project right now, and warns that it took 10 people a whole month to build the previous camp. With a very confident smile, the protagonist summons several floating cubes, saying the solution to speed everything up is simply to use his multitasking. The man widens his eyes, totally shocked, and comments that forging 2 items at the same time is already considered a super advanced technique among players. But to leave the client even more bewildered, the boy creates dozens of glowing arrays flying around him, showing that his limit goes far beyond the ordinary. An immense energy net surrounds the entire plant, while the gray-haired man yells in terror, trying to understand how many processes the artisan is running at once. Ignoring his ally's surprise, the boy raises his arms to the sky, and the cubes fire huge beams of magical light to shape all that sacred wood. Commanding his mass creation, the young man unleashes a colossal amount of mana, activating his supreme forging technique and lighting up that entire great forest. The extreme force of the process generates a true storm of blue energy, forcing the two adventurers to brace themselves against the strong magical winds there. In a matter of seconds, the plant begins to transform, taking the shape of beautiful wooden stairs and suspension bridges that look incredibly safe. This magic builds the long path in the blink of an eye, fitting the beams perfectly while the beautiful architecture spreads across the highest branches. Finally, the light fades, revealing a huge complex of cabins integrated into nature, and the boy sighs a bit sweaty, announcing that the job is done. The scene then cuts, revealing that arrogant defeated big guy from before, and we see the coward dragging himself across the dirt to escape the area. But his pathetic escape is interrupted when a mysterious person appears in front of him, stating very coldly that they watched his entire massive failure. The shadow expresses disappointment, revealing that they got rid of the other founders on his orders, just to hand over control of the area, and laments that their effort went to waste. The big villain tries to explain himself but is suddenly hit by a bright beam of light, falling down defeated instantly. Then, the mysterious silhouette in the tree guarantees that they will make excellent use of the energy of the guy who just lost his life. Changing the scene, we see a system screen showing the incredible sales of the rare weapons, which yielded an absolute fortune for the group. With the huge reward from building the new base, the young man's total profit surpassed an incredible 6 million gold coins. The protagonist celebrates that they now have 7 million saved up, although their final big goal is still a long way off. Walking through the city streets, he mentions to his robotic guardian how the payment from that forest really helped line their pockets. At that moment, the skilled crafter gives a thoughtful look, realizing that the costs of buying materials are getting higher and higher. The boy laments that they can't gather everything themselves to save money, and suddenly the system displays a new unread message alert. The little fairy panics, revealing that the letter is a direct summons from the autonomous committee, leaving the hero totally confused. Hearing all that yelling, the dedicated android tilts her head, very confused, trying to figure out what this mysterious organization could be. It is then explained that the big difference between the real labyrinth and the original game is the lack of moderators to keep order in the world. In normal games, the support team works all day just to resolve disputes and punish cheaters who break the rules. However, in this new magical world, the dangerous dungeon doesn't reject malicious explorers, letting cruel villains do whatever they want. Cutting to a luxurious room, we see the artisan sitting with his bodyguard as he finds out this group was created to maintain peace. With a super mocking smile, the young man asks if the organization actually does anything useful, seeing as that cowardly shooter did whatever he wanted. The crafter himself acknowledges that the dungeon is simply gigantic, and it would be impossible to maintain absolute order on all the lower floors. Then, the large double wooden doors suddenly open, and a mysterious person enters the room, catching our hero's attention. A light blue-haired employee greets the young man politely, thanking him for coming after sending that totally unexpected invitation. The protagonist states he is certain he hasn't broken any rules, and the employee points out that someone else will explain the details. Then an elegant blonde woman, wearing a beautiful gown, appears, introducing herself as Ishtar and saying it's an honor to meet the boy. Taking a step forward in her luxurious heels, the rich woman reveals that in the old game, the young man was the only crafter to reach max level. The lady continues her speech, claiming our hero was also the only player capable of completing every single recipe that existed. Very boldly, the woman holds the artisan's chin, stating she only knew him from rumors, while the little fairy freaks out with jealousy. Pulling her face away, the lady points her finger, confessing that it took a huge amount of work to dig up all this classified info about his past. The madame sits very elegantly on the couch, admitting she now perfectly understands how he managed to replicate that dark shield. Immediately, the boy searches his memory and realizes that this rich blonde is the exact same person who won the auction for the legendary Black Shield. Faced with this huge coincidence, the young man puts on a super serious expression, trying to deduce what a woman like that would want with him. Not wanting to waste time, the organization's leader cuts straight to the chase and loudly declares that she has an offer he cannot refuse. With an authoritative look, the rich woman demands that the skilled crafter immediately stop selling copies of those rare weapons on the market. Hearing this absurd prohibition, the protagonist widens his eyes, totally stunned, wondering what's wrong with this crazy rich lady. The boy argues that his forged items are completely genuine and asks for the exact reason why he should stop selling them. but the blonde replies with great arrogance, saying his creations are devaluing her precious collection. She shows off her rare weapons, stating that the rarity of her arsenal is being ruined, and that this rule applies to everything she acquires in the future. Then, our hero gets completely outraged by the woman's audacity and yells, claiming this could only be a bad joke. With this, the blue-haired employee steps into the conversation, revealing an unusual proposal to solve that whole problem. The suited young man explains that the madam has requested a judgment duel in the grand arena, where the use of substitute fighters is fully permitted. Hearing this, the young crafter scowls and shoots a highly annoyed look, realizing he's been cornered by that crazy rich lady. He soon remembers that these duels to settle disputes between explorers are quite common, and there's nothing special about it. The little fairy gets furious thinking about the 100 million they need to gather to cure her, saying that banning sales is completely out of the question. At that moment, the protagonist analyzes the blonde's cynical smile and realizes that refusing the fight would lead the villain to use worse methods to mess with them. So the artisan reaches a bold conclusion, thinking that accepting the challenge might be the best way out for them. After all, the blue-haired employee emphasizes that a victory would grant official approval for the sales, and a duel in the arena would bring incredible publicity to the shop. However, the hero crosses his arms and mentions to his guardian that the rich lady's arrogant attitude doesn't match that of a simple common explorer. The little fairy tries to make sense of the situation, asking about the madame's class, but then remembers this title just means she's a beginner player. The young man agrees and warns that the fact she is a newbie is exactly the most dangerous part of this whole mess. He quickly deduces that the enemy must use real, world money to hire strong mercenaries while staying safe on the surface area. The boy understands that the enemy will definitely hire a combat specialist for the arena, and the real problem is figuring out how to defeat that guy. With a wicked smile, the madam demands an immediate answer and threatens to take extreme measures if the artisan decides to back out of the big challenge. Showing no fear, the boy accepts the fight on the condition that she leaves them alone forever if they lose, and the blonde swears on her own pride. The scene cuts to the front of the boy's house, where his tiny companion asks if he is sure about this, knowing the danger they will face. Being very blunt, the robotic maid sweeps the wooden floor and warns that her master wouldn't stand a chance of winning by fighting alone. The hero accepts the harsh truth and compares his base stats to a paladin's, remembering that being a crafter makes him terrible at combat. But with a gentle smile, he looks at the little fairy and declares he will do whatever it takes to save his sister and wouldn't accept the fight if there was no chance. With that, the protagonist turns to the dedicated android and orders her to act as his substitute fighter in the grand arena duel. The machine promptly accepts the command, but shows some insecurity, asking if her master isn't overestimating her abilities. The robot does some quick math picturing the rich lady's bodyguard and estimates their win rate would be a mere 30%. Instead of getting sad, the boy celebrates, revealing he expected only 10%, and the maid scowls, wanting to punch him. Regaining his composure, the boy reminds his little sister that stats don't matter that much since they beat the mutant dragon while at a disadvantage. He points to the android, claiming that with the right equipment, any battle can be won, and that true strength comes from the forge. Holding his glowing magic cube, the artisan smiles confidently and promises to craft supreme weapons for the robot, as long as he gets the exact rare materials needed. The boy jokes, saying he'll get a collar ready for his substitute fighter, but the android begs him, for the love of God, not to do that. Getting back on track, the hero guarantees that with his equipment they can win, and the little fairy agrees, saying the real problem is the materials. The little girl panics, recalling that buying everything would cost a fortune, plus the weapons could break in the fight, making her head explode. Then, the young crafter pets his little sister's head, telling her to relax because he already has a perfect plan to solve this situation. The scene cuts to reveal the metallic remains of that giant robot from before, and the artisan announces they'll use the boss's scrap to forge the perfect weapon. He stares at the huge metal shell lying on the dark floor, guaranteeing that this pile of junk will be their big ticket to victory in the arena. Wasting no time, our protagonist rolls up his sleeves and agilely begins taking apart the machine's heavy pieces with his tools. With an excited smile on his face, the boy holds up a small golden gear, celebrating that he managed to extract another super valuable piece from there. The tiny companion helps by carrying a huge piece, while the hero celebrates the great haul, thankful that no one had looted the place. He then mentions that the scrap only stayed there thanks to the mysterious self-repair system the giant dungeon itself possesses. Then we see the long rope they used to climb down the hole in the ceiling, showing that the group was exploring that hidden lab. With this, the dedicated maid walks over carrying a large basket full of rare parts and reports that she has finished scouting the entire area. The boy thanks her, saying that is more than enough material for the project, while the robot trusts the crafting work in his hands. However, the tin girl lowers her head, looking a bit sad, and laments that her old function of generating her own weapons isn't working right now. She explains that recreating the equipment would be like regenerating a body part, but unfortunately, that function was lost along with her old memories. The little fairy flies up to her friend's face, trying to comfort her, and comments that she would have loved to see the powerful fighter's personal equipment in action. At that moment, the crafter agrees, recalling that some rare variants of mechanical monsters in the old game actually had that great ability. We then see several of these different robotic creatures that could materialize lethal weapons out of thin air to surprise players during fights. The young man analyzes the data, explaining that the raid boss's weapon should be absurdly strong, but there is no way to fix a broken system. Then, with a very serious posture, our protagonist approaches the silent maid, asking to pose a very important question to her. Walking slowly, he asks just to confirm if the Tin Warrior truly can't remember absolutely anything from her past there. The machine confirms the suspicion, reporting that all her files are inaccessible and that there seem to be frozen memories in her database. She suggests that unlocking the files might bring the weapon function back, but the hero interrupts her immediately, telling her not to push it. With a worried look, the boy thinks to himself that these hidden files are surely her destructive memories as an enemy boss. The boy pictures a corrupted version of their ally, fearing that, if she recovers her old memories, she might turn into a dangerous threat against them. Then, the young man is suddenly snapped out of his tense thoughts when the android steps closer and stares at him with those big glowing eyes. The tin blonde asks directly if her master truly believes he's capable of forging equipment strong enough to win the duel. The little fairy jumps into the conversation, shouting that the cure depends on it and they can't lose the fight just because of a poorly made weapon. Completely changing her attitude, the little girl smiles full of confidence, guaranteeing everything will work out since the weapons will be made by her incredible brother. Hearing his companion's massive support, the skilled artisan breaks into a beautiful, confident smile and asks the two of them to leave all the rest to him. The announcer declares that the two substitute fighters have finally entered the grand arena, while the crowd goes wild cheering from the stands. Then, the blonde madam is proudly introduced alongside her giant mercenary named Gilbert, who holds the prestigious battle master class. Soon after, on the other side, the young artisan is announced, and everyone is surprised to see his fighter is just a mechanical doll in a maid outfit. The little fairy is shocked by the number of people watching, while the protagonist is relieved to see that no one recognized the robot's true strength. The announcer states that any outside help is forbidden, and victory is only achieved when the enemy is completely knocked out or shut down in the arena. The giant mercenary glares at the little android with deep disdain, feeling completely insulted for having to fight something he considers so weak. But the mechanical maid coldly suggests that the big guy should start praising her so he'll have a better excuse when she takes him down. The little fairy cheers from afar while the hero analyzes the opponent, calculating that the brute's level must easily be around the 600s. He remembers that this is the cap for hired mercenaries, as stronger warriors prefer to hunt in the dangerous depths of the Great Labyrinth. With this, the boy deduces the opponent is one of the best on the market, but he trusts his fighter will win if she uses the full power of the gear he forged. At that exact moment, a wooden hammer strikes the huge bell at the top of the arena, declaring that the intense combat has finally begun. The sound of the heavy strike echoes throughout the place, making the crowd cheer excitedly as the two competitors prepare to make their first move in that clash. Wasting not a single second, the huge mercenary raises his colossal sword while concentrating an extremely powerful magic aura into the heavy blade. The brute attacks with everything, trying to crush the little robot head on. But the fearless maid just stares at the blade without showing an ounce of fear. The brutal impact of the attack generates a gigantic dust explosion that kicks up lots of debris, covering that entire section of the lit arena floor. The collision creates a true pillar of pure energy, forcing the boy to cover his face, while a magic barrier protects the luxurious grandstand area. Soon the smoke begins to settle, and the giant warrior is completely surprised to see that his powerful initial attack didn't have the desired effect. Then, we see the nimble android perfectly intact, blocking the enemy's colossal sword, using only that legendary black shield forged by her master. The blonde madam watches the perfect defense from afar and scowls, super annoyed to see the opposing maid has an exact replica of her rarest item. Then, with her defense stabilized, the warrior's mechanical eye glows brightly as she invokes the dark shield's powerful petrification skill. The veteran grits his teeth, feeling the magic cover his body, and soon realizes he's about to be completely paralyzed by that lethal effect. A massive purple wave explodes across the arena, while the announcer states that getting petrified means automatic defeat, since no healers are allowed there. But proving his enormous strength, the brute simply powers forward, slicing the magic wave in half and roaring in fury to continue his terrible offensive. The warrior raises his sword, declaring he was already prepared for that, and warns that simple negative effects would never work on a fighter of his caliber. The opponent unleashes a strike that tears up the ground, forcing the machine to drop her shield to jump high and dodge the destructive impact. Hovering in the sky, the robotic girl reveals her true equipment, activating the lethal twin blades on her arms and firing up the flight units on her legs. Utilizing her thruster's supersonic speed, the powerful android dives like a true meteor toward the mercenary in the arena below. Seeing that lethal attack falling from the sky, the giant warrior quickly puts his sword in front of his body, taking a strong stance of absolute defense. The maid delivers a formidable spinning strike using her energy blades, colliding directly with the heavy iron and creating countless sparks in the clash. This intense struggle for power generates a colossal luminous explosion that shakes the entire structure of the venue, proving the battle is only just heating up. The force of the strike is so massive that it destroys the entire floor, and the little android is thrown backward, quickly disappearing into the dust. But the mechanical warrior keeps total focus on the battle, quickly analyzing the situation while chunks of stone fall around her. Then, the huge mercenary suddenly appears behind her like a true, terrifying shadow with red eyes, ready to attack. Her agile sensors glow intensely, detecting the imminent danger just in time to prepare a new evasive maneuver. The big guy unleashes a brutal top-down strike, but the maid crosses her twin blades, managing to block the heavy sword. However, the enemy's crushing force ends up shattering the robot's weapons into several pieces, leaving the little fairy completely desperate. The small machine slides across the arena floor, using her thrusters to gain some distance, ending up totally unarmed against the brute. The veteran then points his sword with a very arrogant look, suggesting his opponent simply give up before getting destroyed. But the brave guardian stands back up, releasing energy sparks from her body, and shows no intention of surrendering so easily. Watching from afar, the young artisan breaks into a big, confident smile, asking his little sister to stay totally calm. At that moment, the robot concentrates a huge amount of blue light into her arms, thanking him for his concern while prepping her counterattack. The skilled crafter keeps smiling, knowing exactly what is going to happen now that his fighter is about to use her maximum power. The light in the arena becomes absurdly strong, blinding almost everyone in the place, as the dedicated maid channels all that mysterious energy. Then, a colossal golden robotic hand appears floating behind her back, revealing the supreme weapon the boy forged to guarantee victory. The mercenary stares at the new weapon, and says the real fight is going to start right now. Getting ready for combat. With that, the brute throws away his broken sword and summons two new, smaller blades for a faster fighting style. The android's green eyes focus entirely on the enemy as she analyzes his new stance and prepares for the next move. She then uses her new giant arm to block the swift strikes of the dual swords, generating lots of sparks upon impact. The veteran warrior then decides to use a special skill, engulfing his sword in a powerful and sinister red aura. With his energized weapon, he charges forward, shouting that he will personally test the power of the little robot's new equipment. The mechanical maid doesn't back down, and her body glows with an intense blue light as she prepares a counterattack with the giant arm. The two fighters collide with everything they have, creating a trail of red and blue light in an incredible power struggle in the middle of the arena. The impact of the two forces generates a colossal explosion of energy that shakes the entire structure of the venue and kicks up a lot of dust. Even with all his strength, the mercenary is completely shocked to feel the overwhelming power of the little android's attack. Right after, he appears wielding a heavy axe and is impressed by the strength he is facing in that duel. The robotic arm lands a direct punch on the axe, pushing the warrior back and proving its superiority in brute strength. The man breaks into a cold sweat feeling the pressure, and the fighter warns him that this weapon is her master's masterpiece. She continues, stating that there is no scenario where the equipment created by him could be defeated in direct combat. The Tin Girl's determined eye shines brightly as she prepares to use the full power of her new weapon. The giant hand lands a devastating punch on the mercenary, creating a shockwave that echoes throughout the battle arena. The rich madam is shocked by the scene, while the young artisan and his little sister watch everything with a confident smile. The warrior's gauntlet begins to crack, and he is startled to realize that the robot's weapon has an equipment destroying effect. The android lands lightly and explains that they fully expected the enemy to be prepared against the petrification effect, and that is exactly why her master equipped her with an overload weapon designed to shatter the opponent's gear. The maid admits this is an overwhelming way to end the duel, but it was the only way to guarantee their victory there. With the petrification item in hand, she says she will help promote their best product for the sake of her young lady. Seeing the tables turn, the rich madam becomes completely furious and cannot believe what is happening right in front of her. From afar, she screams in desperation, trying to figure out how her best mercenary was losing in such a humiliating way. Then, the giant fighter is completely turned to stone, and the announcer calls the impressive comeback with an overwhelming finish. The announcer declares victory for Artisan Soma's representative, the incredible mechanical doll named Eve. The arrogant woman covers her face in shame as the announcer shouts that the weakest class of all just won the duel. Two hooded men run desperately to help the petrified mercenary, not knowing what to do in that situation. In the stands, our protagonist smiles victoriously, with a mysterious gleam in his eye as he watches the result of his plan. The little fairy celebrates on the android's shoulder, and the announcer declares the beginning of a new chapter in the history of the Phantom Labyrinth. A few days pass, and we see a beautiful city with a clear, sunny sky. The little fairy is amazed by the various screens showing the countless crafting requests they have received. With a smug smile, she says she knew her brother's true power would finally be revealed to everyone. In the back of the workshop, the robot comments that she has nothing to complain about as long as sales keep going up like this. The android then serves some tea and warns that from now on, her master is going to work hard like a pack horse. She points out that she fought until she lost her arms, so it's only fair that the boy works until he loses 5 or 6 of his own. The crafter yells that he doesn't even have that many arms, while his little sister just enjoys her tea, ignoring the argument. The little one then looks at them with great gratitude and sincerely thanks them for all the effort they are putting in. The boy and the maid look at the little creature fondly as she continues her touching speech. Floating there, she promises to reward them for everything once she goes back to normal, leaving the two of them deeply moved. But the cute moment is interrupted by an auction notification, and the hero explains that he listed several rare items to sell there. With a smile, he figured the auction would be on fire, and was quite curious to see the final sales results for the items. The screen then confirms that 3 shields and all the other listed equipment were sold. But the real surprise comes next. We find out that the buyer of absolutely everything was the rich madam they defeated in the arena duel. The artisan bursts out laughing, understanding her move, because if the rich lady buys everything, the rarity of the items doesn't drop. His sister and the android are left with their jaws dropping at that woman's bizarre strategy and the amount of money she spent. The boy comments that rich people are on another level, and that, despite the weird logic, they ended up gaining a very profitable client. The screen shows the absurd profit from the sales, and even with taxes and costs, they made a nice fortune toward their goal. The scene shifts to a dark alley, where we see that arrogant mage from earlier walking with an expression of pure rage. He looks at an auction advertisement and immediately recognizes the face of that artisan who humiliated him in the past. With hatred in his eyes, the mage crushes the screen and complains that his life has turned into a nightmare since he met that crafter. Suddenly, a mysterious figure emerges from the shadows and comments that it looks like the mage is going through a hard time. The stranger then offers his strength to the mage, guaranteeing that together they can face that skilled artisan. The mage turns around, startled, and asks how the hooded man knows his name, but soon realizes that's not the most important thing. He draws a glowing dagger and threatens the stranger, saying that if this is a joke, the guy won't leave there in one piece. But the hooded man is much faster and strikes the dagger into the mage's back, bringing him to his knees instantly. The mage cries out in pain as a strange blue energy begins to take over his entire body without him understanding a thing. Then, the mysterious figure holds the glowing dagger and asks the mage to accept that power without any resistance. An intense blue light erupts from the wound, and the mage lets out an agonizing scream as the energy completely consumes him. Back in the present, the protagonist says that with all this money, it is finally time to execute their next plan. The mechanical maid listens closely to her master's plan with a serious expression on her face. Looking at the beautiful houses in the city, she asks if this was the next step he had mentioned before. Our hero confirms this as he opens the door to an establishment, saying he had this in mind for quite some time. Upon entering the place, a suited man greets them, saying he was already expecting a visit from the famous artisan. With a professional smile, the guy confirms the boy is there to rent a shop, and he replies that he will decide after seeing it. The man explains that explorers can rent buildings to set up their own businesses on the surface. He then points out that managing a place like this isn't complicated, because the system handles transactions automatically. The little fairy questions the high rent price, since they could just sell things for free in the labyrinth. The broker laughs and says there are many benefits to having a fixed shop, such as securing a workforce. Furthermore, a rented shop doesn't need constant supervision, allowing them to explore and sell at the same time. But the protagonist's little sister squints suspiciously and asks if there isn't something weird about this whole story. She points out that a prime property in such a busy area shouldn't be completely empty like that. The man gets startled by the question, and the android glares at him, making him stammer and guarantee that the property is safe. He then begins to list the advantages of the 3-story building, featuring a residential area and a large warehouse. Sweating cold, the broker starts stammering as he is about to reveal the real reason the place is empty. Suddenly, he admits there is a ridiculous rumor that the place is haunted, and the little fairy panics right away. The little one gets terrified, and the man tries to calm her down, saying it is just a baseless rumor meant to scare people. Trembling with fear, she lists the ghost stories she's heard, like customers vanishing and objects moving on their own. Our protagonist flashes a sinister smile and says he would love to meet a real ghost, since he isn't afraid of anything. He theorizes it might be a ghost-type monster that came up to the surface, or just a prank by some explorer. The boy even says he'd prefer it to be a real ghost, and his sister yells, saying she doesn't prefer that one bit. With his cube in hand, he decides to craft some anti-ghost items like holy water and talismans, just in case. At that exact moment, a glowing, ghostly figure suddenly appears behind one of the counters in the empty shop. The blue creature floats silently in the air with empty eyes, and a very scary appearance for anyone to see. The little fairy stands completely paralyzed with fear, her mouth hanging open in pure terror at the sight of the apparition. She points desperately at the ghost and warns her brother that she sees something, but he doesn't understand what she means. The boy looks in the indicated direction but sees absolutely nothing, confused by his little sister's despair. She then realizes it is a real ghost, and the artisan asks her to calm down because he has an explanation for this. The young man calmly explains that many ghost-type monsters can simply turn invisible to others. The robot confirms she doesn't see anything and theorizes that because his sister is a fairy, she can see things they can't. The boy theorizes that what his sister saw must be the source of the haunting rumors, and the little one asks why they are so calm. Still scared, the little fairy tries to describe what she is seeing so they can better understand the situation. She explains that the creature is standing near the counter and doesn't seem to be moving for now. Understanding the plan, the protagonist decides they should split up to look for any other ghosts that might be hiding. He explains that even if it's invisible, the anti-spirit tools will still work, and he holds up a flask of holy water. The young man then hands the holy water to the broker and asks him to help, as it is his duty to keep the peace there. The man looks awkward and reveals that they have already tried using countermeasures against ghosts several times, but nothing worked. The little fairy gets scared again upon hearing that not even special items worked against the apparition. Our hero then approaches the counter and says that if it's a monster, the talisman should react right away. The little fairy approaches with the talisman in hand, and the paper begins to float near the ghostly creature. Trembling with fear, she reaches out and touches the talisman to the ghost, but to her surprise, nothing happens. With her eyes wide, the tiny creature realizes that something is very wrong with that apparition. She shouts that there was no reaction at all and concludes that it isn't a ghost-type monster like they thought. With that, she hides behind the talisman and theorizes it might be an illusion spell left behind by a mage. The ghost then slowly starts to turn around, and the little fairy senses that something is watching them from somewhere. She looks behind the counter and notices the creature is moving toward them very slowly. Suddenly, the little scout is pulled forcefully behind the counter by something hiding there. A shadowy hand appears out of nowhere and tightly grabs the little fairy, pulling her into the darkness. She tries to break free, and the talisman falls from her hands as she is dragged into a mysterious shadow. The talisman hits the ground, and the blue ghostly creature simply vanishes into thin air, as if it were never there. The little girl screams desperately, trying to reach a distant light, but the darkness quickly swallows her whole. Once inside the shadow, she realizes this isn't a ghost monster and wonders what on earth this thing is. Her eyes widen in pure terror upon seeing the true form of the creature that captured her in that moment. In the darkness, a scary woman with purple hair and cracked skin appears, revealing the ghost's true form. The protagonist stands with his back to the counter and concludes that, at the very least, there is something weird going on in that building. He turns to the broker and the android, saying he trusts his sister and knows she wouldn't lie about this. The young man shows the talismans and says that to uncover the truth, they need to rule out the possibilities one by one. He remembers when he was a kid and wished ghosts were real, but unfortunately, no one ever showed up to visit him. The broker suggests that the labyrinth might be a special case, but the boy remains skeptical about it. Suddenly, the protagonist turns to look behind the counter and calls his sister's name, worried by her silence. The little fairy stares at the scary creature and realizes this monster is something quite different from what she imagined. She discovers that it is actually a spirit-type monster that just looks like a common ghost. With this, the little one understands why the countermeasures didn't work, since the creature's species is completely different. The girl remembers that the spirit hides in the shadows and can only be driven out by a strong light from the outside. Trapped inside, she begins to despair and begs her brother to help her get out of that darkness. Then a flashback begins, showing the day she met an older boy for the first time in her home. She didn't quite understand what passing away meant, so she wouldn't accept that her parents' friend's son was going to live there. Even though she tried to be a good girl in front of everyone, she felt like her home and family were being stolen. One day, The little girl ended up getting lost, and night fell without her being able to find her way back home. Alone and scared, the girl started crying, honestly thinking she was going to meet her end right there. But suddenly, a bright light appeared, and the young boy showed up with a lantern in hand to save her from the darkness. With tear-filled eyes, she promises herself that she will never forget that day as long as she lives. Back in the present, a powerful golden light strikes the spirit of darkness, making it recoil in pain instantly. With that, the little fairy is freed from the shadow, and the creature screams in agony as it is exposed to the bright light. Free from the darkness, the little one breaks into a big smile of relief. Having been saved once again by her brother, she then flies toward him, shouting his name. Happy that he realized she was in danger, the little girl reaches her arms toward the light that saved her from that scary and dark creature. But in the midst of all the excitement, she ends up crashing right into her brother's face, who wasn't expecting that. From the impact, the little fairy gets a bit dizzy, her cheeks blushing with embarrassment for the scene she just caused. The shadow spirit then melts into a dark puddle, and the protagonist watches the creature fall apart on the floor. But the puddle regroups, and the creature takes on an even more monstrous form with glowing red eyes. Wasting no time, a powerful golden ray of light hits the monster head. On pushing it back, the luminous attack pierces through the creature and hits the ground, creating a small energy explosion on the spot. We discover that the attack came from a star-shaped weapon our hero crafted to fight the monster. The spirit begins to disintegrate in the light, and the boy says it is time to blow that thing to pieces once and for all. The broker praises the young man's quickness, and the artisan explains that all he needed was the talisman his sister dropped. He figured out that what captured her was something that looked like a ghost but wasn't, and the prime suspect was a shadow spirit. Then, he used the light from a solar mirror to force the creature out of the shadows and finished it off with the light weapon. The boy then says he knew where to strike, because the little one probably saw something important, which leaves her confused. It is revealed that the first apparition she saw was just a decoy watching them from afar behind the counter. The little one realizes she was attacked when she tried to see what the decoy was looking at, and that there were two creatures there the whole time. She is shocked by the revelation, and wonders how her brother and the others didn't notice the presence of the second creature. At that moment, the blue ghost begins to fade into thin air in front of the broker and the mechanical maid. The little fairy then remembers the rumor about the adventurers who vanished after being attacked by ghosts. She theorizes that the ghostly figure was the spirit of an explorer who wanted to get revenge on the monster that defeated him. The scene shifts to a dark church, and a voice complains that the shadow spirit was defeated in a pathetic way. We find out the voice belongs to the arrogant mage, who throws his hat on the ground and yells that this shouldn't be possible. Suddenly, a hooded figure appears and laughs at the mage's misfortune, saying it serves him right. The hooded man criticizes the mage's plan, saying it was too complicated to control a spirit to attack the artisan. He asks if the mage is stupid and points out that it would have been faster to use his powerful magic to attack the boy directly. The hooded figure explains that to make someone suffer, it's more effective to target the people around him rather than the guy himself. The mysterious figure then slowly starts to pull back his hood, revealing a cynical smile beneath the shadow. A white-haired man named Diablo is revealed, who was disappointed by the mage's failure to complete the mission. The mage panics upon seeing his superior and stammers, asking why he didn't warn him he was coming here. The mysterious boss then calls out the mage's name, and also the name of the hunter who was with him. With a threatening voice, he says he will not allow them to forget the reason he gave them power. Diablo shoots a cold glare and warns them not to keep disappointing him with their constant failures. A bird-like creature emerges from the shadows and bows before its master, awaiting the next orders. The mage tries to apologize, but the hunter interrupts him, telling him to shut up and sit quietly in his corner. The creature then says it is his turn to act, and that the mage should just watch with his jaw dropped. In his bird-man form, the hunter swears that he will be the one to tear that cursed artisan apart. About half a month after the ghost incident, a crowd gathers in front of a shop in the city. The shop, called Artisan's Workshop, finally opened, and business has been booming every single day since. Our hero explains that he sells the items in the shop and uses the money to buy more materials and craft new equipment. He shares that most of the 10 million they gathered was used for the renovation and the shop's inventory, but the boy sees this as an operational cost and an initial investment so they can profit even more in the future. Thanks to all the publicity, daily sales reach 200,000 gold, with a profit margin of 60 to 70%. Exhausted from working so much, the young man complains to the little fairy, who corrects him by pointing out he repeated the same sentence twice. With the shop running well, he decides it's time to start accepting item crafting orders from clients again. His sister gets super excited about the idea and suggests an order from the Mechanical Doll Appreciation Society. The boy and the maid are shocked by the bizarre suggestion, while the little one tries to explain herself better. With an awkward smile, the little fairy says she has a personal reason for recommending this specific order. She reveals that the president of this club is someone she used to explore with a lot, but they haven't been in touch for a while. With pleading eyes, the tiny creature asks if they can't accept this order for her sake. Our hero then agrees to take the job, and the little fairy celebrates by jumping for joy in his arms. The scene shifts to an outdoor cafe where our hero and the maid wait for the client's arrival. The boy comments that people who love mechanical dolls are usually a bit weird, and he hopes that won't be the case here. Suddenly, the footsteps of someone approaching catch the attention of the group sitting at the table. A woman in nun's clothes and armor introduces herself as Violet and asks if he is Shika's older brother. The woman is shocked to find out that the little fairy is actually Shika, and that she turned into a little monster. Our hero is confused by the situation and asks the woman to explain the details of that order. The fan club president shares that she runs the group and was amazed by the mechanical maid's duel in the arena. She and her friends then surround the robot and begin analyzing every single detail of her as if she were a work of art. The woman starts chatting with the little fairy about doll clothes and completely ignores the artisan. Suddenly, a giant shadow covers the entire city, and a hole opens up in the center of the dungeon below. Our hero notices something weird and looks up at the sky, suspicious of the sudden change in the environment. Without warning, the bird, like hunter, dives from the sky and attacks the protagonist with his sharp claws. The boy manages to block the attack with his arm, but is thrown backward by the force of the impact. The villain takes flight again, and the nuns and the maid look up at the sky, frightened by the surprise attack. The creature lands in the middle of the street, kicking up a lot of dust and leaving the surrounding explorers confused. The hunter laughs evilly, saying it served the artisan right for humiliating him in front of everyone. Lying on the ground, the boy recognizes the predator's voice and is shocked to see that a human has turned into a monster. The villain says he came back to finish him off in his new body, which he gained by abandoning his humanity. A bright green light appears on the ground, creating a magic circle that traps the protagonist inside a barrier. The bird man then grabs the boy and flies high, saying he's going to drop him into the dungeon's hole. The villain admits the artisan is strong, but says he wouldn't survive a fall from that height, no matter his hit points. With a parting smile, the hunter drops the boy, letting him fall toward a certain doom at the bottom of the labyrinth. But suddenly, the creature feels something weird and notices that his prey isn't falling like he should. The villain looks down and is shocked to see the boy clinging to his leg with a strange object. We then see that the protagonist used a pair of handcuffs to lock himself to the bird man's leg so he wouldn't fall. With a blank scroll and thunderbeast pelt, the artisan prepares to craft a new item mid-fall. With a confident smile, he says he's taking the villain down with him and activates the lightning spell scroll. The magic surrounds both of them in a circle of golden lightning, and the hunter panics at the trap. A blinding explosion of light takes over the sky as the powerful magic hits them both head-on. The bird man screams in pain as he is electrocuted by the magic, but the boy firmly withstands the shock. Even while feeling the pain, the protagonist maintains his focus and makes sure his trap works exactly as planned. The two plummet from the sky, leaving a trail of black smoke and electrical sparks behind. The villain recovers and yells that the artisan shouldn't get cocky over a little greeting like that. Falling headfirst, The boy realizes he still isn't totally safe from that deadly fall. He thinks about crafting a flight item, but lacks the materials, so he decides just to cushion the fall damage. With his cube in hand, he prepares to craft something quickly, since it's better than turning into a crushed tomato. The young man then starts falling toward the city rooftops and needs to act fast to survive. Suddenly, a firm hand grabs his arm, stopping his fall to a certain doom. We discover that the paladin Oliver saved him, and he asks in confusion what on earth happened there. Our hero laughs in relief and says he'll explain everything once they are safely back on the ground. A call screen pops up, and he realizes it's his sister, worried about what just happened. The boy puts on a serious expression as he answers the call, getting ready to explain the situation. His eyes widen upon seeing who is on the other end of the line, and he is surprised by the call. A man in a red cape stands in front of a giant window and says the surface is in chaos because of him. With a serious look, the man says he is going to need a very detailed explanation about everything that happened. He introduces himself as Altair, a Rune Knight class, and one of the leaders of the Guardian Committee. With an authoritative voice, he demands an explanation right now and makes it clear he won't accept excuses. Down on the street, a group of explorers talks about the hunter who turned into a monster, and rumors begin to spread. The little fairy's nun friend complains about what happened, and the maid agrees that the situation got quite complicated. The little one then receives a message from her brother and celebrates in relief, knowing he is okay. She explains that the committee called him in to explain what happened, and the robot warns it might be too early to relax. The maid says things are about to get complicated, and the crowd of explorers glares at them suspiciously. Back in the room, the committee leader apologizes for calling him so suddenly, but the situation demanded it. The young artisan just crosses his arms and waits to hear what the important man has to say. The two stare at each other in a tense silence while the sunlight illuminates the luxurious room they are in. With a mocking smile, the artisan says he doesn't mind the summons, but the man's cape doesn't suit him. The protagonist shoots a teasing look at the committee leader, who doesn't seem to care about the comment. The Rune Knight then breaks into a big smile, seeming to like the sincerity of the boy staring at him. He laughs and says he knew the young man was like this, so he isn't surprised by his attitude. The man explains he only accepted the commander position because he was the strongest volunteer, and the artisan says he hasn't changed a bit. With a serious look, the knight says the bird man who attacked him seemed to be someone he knew. The boy replies that he doesn't care who he was. He just wants to know if the story about humans turning into monsters is true. The commander then confirms that he figured it out quickly and explains that it was just pure luck that one of his subordinates was at the scene. He reveals that rumors about monsterification had been circulating for a while, but the committee never took them seriously. The committee leader says that half of those rumors started with the artisan himself, and the rest were just baseless gossip. The boy shares that he had been investigating and asking questions to find clues about his sister's transformation. But now, with the bird man's attack, these rumors might become a fact and cause mass panic. Suddenly, his sister's friend bursts into the room, screaming desperately that something terrible is happening in the city. She runs in, and the protagonist turns to see what is going on with an expression of surprise. The nun then yells that the city's material shops are going crazy with a massive crowd of people. We see several desperate explorers trying to buy rare materials like crystals and elixirs at any cost. The crowd swarms the shops, trying to buy everything they can, and the inventory starts running out quickly. The little fairy's friend panics and says everyone is trying to buy the materials for the philosopher's stone. The boy understands that, just as the commander said, the news of monsterification spread and everyone found out about the cure. The mechanical maid gets confused and asks how they plan to craft the stone even if they have all the materials. She points out that, as far as she knows, her master is the only one capable of successfully crafting the legendary philosopher's stone. Our hero explains that this is panic buying and that people's logic simply vanishes in these moments. The nun gets desperate and asks what they are going to do now that the materials are selling out so fast. He remembers that the most expensive material is an elixir that costs tens of millions per flask, and shouldn't run out that quickly. The robot then warns that they now have a time limit, and if it takes them 3 months to gather the money, they won't make it. With a determined look, the young artisan decides they need to head back to the shop and come up with a new plan. Back at the workshop, the boy and the maid get ready to discuss the new strategy for the current situation. The protagonist announces the new plan, and the little fairy watches him closely, waiting to hear his genius idea. The maid questions if their only option is realistic, and the boy stares at her with a serious and determined expression. He says the only thing they can do is craft and sell items, and for that, they need something that sells for an even higher price. The blue screen glows, showing the full structure of the Phantom Labyrinth, which is divided into 3 main parts. Our hero points to the holographic map and notes that so far they have only farmed on the mid-level floors to make money. With that, his finger moves down to the darkest part of the screen, revealing his interest in exploring the deeper and more dangerous lower floors. The little fairy panics instantly and flies around desperately, begging her brother to drop that crazy idea. The boy argues it would be impossible to wait for the shops to restock the rare materials, as that could take years. Confused by the situation, the mechanical maid raises her hand and asks the scout if the lower floors are really that bad. Trembling with fear, the little creature imagines terrible beasts and warns that this place is only for top-tier explorers. But the young artisan breaks into a confident smile, knowing full well that the materials down there yield weapons worth millions. The protagonist reveals he already explored that place in the past with some veteran friends, which leaves his little sister's jaw dropping. He explains that his old companions basically lived down there and would surely help them if they heard about their plan. With wide eyes, the little fairy keeps freaking out with worry, while the android agrees they should take the risk. The robotic warrior thumps her chest and swears she will dedicate her entire life to protecting her master in that terrifying place. With a threatening look, the robot warns she will not tolerate any reckless behavior, and the boy accepts the scolding, sweating cold. A system screen displays the group's finances, showing they still need 83 million to reach their big goal. A few days pass, and a huge metallic gate slowly begins to open, making a very heavy and thunderous sound. The group finally reaches their destination, and the young man thanks them for the ride, since they didn't have a shortcut pass to the lower floors. A silver, armored knight smiles and says it was no trouble at all, because he was already training his subordinates in that area. The experienced warrior then looks at the little fairy and asks if she has ever had the chance to explore the deeper levels of the labyrinth. With a calm expression and closed eyes, he listens to the little girl confess that she always found that place too dangerous to visit. Suddenly, the protagonist's little sister's attention is caught by something shiny, and her big blue eyes widen in awe. The surrounding scenery is revealed, and we see that the lower level is a bizarre world full of flying islands with volcanoes and waterfalls floating in mid-air. The little scout lets out a cry of total shock, unable to believe that such an absurd place exists hidden deep within that labyrinth. She is amazed to see that the cave ceiling looks like an infinite sky full of white clouds over an endless abyss. The knight explains that the early floors look like normal caves, but the lower levels follow a logic that no one can explain. Standing on a patch of land, they look at the huge elevator while trying to come up with a plan to cross over to the next island. The little fairy breaks into a cold sweat and gets super nervous, realizing that one wrong step there would result in a fatal fall of no return. At that exact moment, a giant winged serpent crosses the sky, and the knight smiles, saying their ride has just arrived. Wasting no time, an archer in the group draws his wooden weapon and aims an arrow of pure glowing energy at the beast. The luminous projectile hits the monster's wing head on, drawing the creature's attention instantly as the leader gives the order to advance. Quickly, the mage girl jumps onto her flying broom with the ninja on her back, and the two blast through the air to start the epic combat. The ninja and the mage manage to capture the giant feathers that fell from the winged monster during the attack. Then, the artisan asks for a second while he activates his glowing cube, using the captured feathers as the main material. With the artifact's magic, he quickly crafts a small, stylish floating boat made entirely from the creature's feathers. Once aboard the vessel, the knight leader says he can only take them this far and gives one last important warning. The warrior warns that a dangerous criminal known as Diablo has started making moves on those lower floors, which scares the fairy. Floating away, the android wants to know what kind of monster this enemy is, but her master reminds her that he is entirely human. The narrator explains that this scary hooded villain is actually a ruthless rogue specialized in taking out other explorers. Hearing the explanation, the protagonist keeps a thoughtful expression, knowing perfectly well that this place hides enormous dangers, but the peaceful trip ends when a gigantic monster's shadow crosses the sky and completely covers the small flying boat. The boy complains about their bad luck, lamenting that they already have enough problems dealing with the sick people on the surface. While he was complaining about the situation, the beast's huge head appears right behind them with sharp fangs, ready to attack. With a swift movement, the monster tries to bite down on the small vessel, forcing the crew to hold on tight so they don't fall. The young artisan yells in desperation upon recognizing the colossal dragon, questioning why such a strong beast would attack right now. The android asks her master to stabilize the boat as they plummet at high speed toward a massive erupting volcano. Sweating cold, the boy warns that trying to fly again would be useless against the giant predator, so their only option is to make a crash landing. The small vessel crashes very violently into the rocky ground, creating a huge trail of destruction all along the path. The impact is so strong that the front of the boat ends up wedged into the volcanic mountain's rocks, kicking up a dense cloud of gray dust. Coughing from the dust, the hero and his bodyguard manage to survive that bizarre crash without any serious injuries. The little fairy sighs in relief, but at that exact moment, a gigantic pillar of intense light erupts right in front of them, illuminating everything. From this blinding light emerges a huge golem, made entirely of heavy rocks and boiling lava, ready to destroy the invaders. Quickly, the artisan hides his little sister behind his body and gets ready to fight, watching the fire creature approach. However, the mechanical warrior makes a silencing gesture, asking her master not to draw the attention of the magma monster passing by them. At that moment, the boy hears a familiar voice calling his name and turns around, getting a big scare from the person he just bumped into. The muscular guy with braided hair laughs, commenting that he saw something falling from the sky and was surprised to realize it was an old acquaintance. The warrior recalls that the artisan had refused his invitation to play in the past and was now diving into those dangerous floors. Suspicious, the maid asks quietly if that brute was one of the hero's old guild friends, and he awkwardly confirms it. Changing the subject, the barbarian warrior watches the smoking volcano and notes that the world has turned into true chaos lately. He thinks it's crazy that people are buying up healing items in bulk since every rare material costs an absurd fortune. The big guy explains that large explorer groups save money for emergencies, and with the panic, they are going to spend absolutely everything. Understanding the critical market situation, the young artisan activates his glowing cube, saying that is exactly why they came down here. The artisan summons a huge glowing red sword and offers it to the barbarian to buy, as if it were an act of charity. Surprised by the speed, the big guy is impressed, while the little fairy sighs, knowing her brother's true intentions. With that, the muscular warrior summons his own giant axe, which emits a strong blue light upon touching the rocky ground. Holding his weapon, the brute states that if the boy has a stronger axe than his, he'd buy it on the spot. The hero smiles, surrounded by several floating magical pieces of equipment, and agrees that crafting things there is much more profitable. Throwing his arms up, the barbarian gets excited and asks if the kid also plans on selling healing items to everyone. The protagonist agrees, recalling that the night group had to return to the surface just to restock. He realizes everyone will need supplies while facing dangerous creatures and being trapped by magical traps. Realizing the genius of the idea, the big guy looks thoughtful, while the young man makes a face showing he has already planned everything out. With a determined look, the item crafter announces that because of this, he is going to face the monsters on that floor alone. The little fairy goes into a total panic hearing that madness, and the boy apologizes, saying this is the best option. He explains that demonstrating the weapons in real combat has always been the best sales pitch they could ever make. The brute suggests having someone else fight, but the artisan counters that seeing a weakling like him win shows the item's true power. Smiling at the boy's determination, the barbarian gives a thumbs up and promises to help gather the necessary materials. Right after, a heavy wooden sign drops hard onto the ground, kicking up dust and marking the start of the grand plan. Holding his glowing cube, the protagonist officially declares his special shop open on the lower floors of the labyrinth. The scene shifts to a bizarre, monstrous plant with tentacles and a large purple eye waiting for prey in the middle of the path. Hiding behind a rock, two explorers watch the creature in lament that the beast has already reached its most dangerous form. The girl in the group holds a communication crystal, sweating cold, while the red, armored warrior grows tense with the situation. Suddenly, our hero runs right past them holding a sword, leaving the two adventurers completely shocked. The young man leaps fearlessly toward the demonic plant with his giant weapon, ignoring the desperate shouts from the duo behind him. With a sharp look, the item crafter activates a green wind magic barrier around his body to protect himself from the impact. One of the poisonous tentacles hits the defense head-on, creating a huge flash as the boy lands firmly on the ground. Then, glowing magic bracelets appear on the protagonist's wrists, transferring an intense red energy into the heavy blade. In a swift motion, he slices off one of the creature's thick arms, making the monster widen its single eye in pure pain. The hero prepares for the final strike, holding his colossal sword that now emanates an incredibly destructive aura of flames. The beast of darkness doesn't give up and raises another huge tentacle, trying to crush the cocky kid once and for all. But the young man is much faster and unleashes a devastating flaming slash that cuts right through the entire mutant plant's body. Watching everything from afar, the two explorers are left with their jaws dropping, unable to believe a simple artisan did that much damage. The monster burns to ashes while the boy pants from exhaustion, proving to everyone the true power of his legendary items. The two explorers run toward the boy, asking how a simple artisan managed to defeat that bizarre creature. With a confident smile on his face, our hero replies that obviously, he used his own crafted items to win the fight. He then begins to show the equipment and explains that he first used a special potion to increase his bodily resistance. In addition, the young man also equipped a magic scarf to block negative effects and some bracelets to gain even more strength. With this, the adventurer duo is completely amazed by the absurd quality of all those glowing weapons and potions. The system then shows that the fire sword was sold for 1 million, while the other accessories also brought in a good amount of cash. Selling various potions and high-quality items, the total profit from this first demonstration reaches the incredible mark of 2 million. Satisfied with their purchases, the two customers wave as they leave, while the boy says goodbye with his back turned and a hand raised. But as soon as they are out of sight, the protagonist lets out a heavy sigh, showing that he is completely exhausted from all the action. He grabs his own shoulder, feeling a lot of pain, because pushing a low-level body like that requires an absurd amount of physical effort. The boy agrees with the barbarian and understands that experienced adventurers would never buy weapons from a stranger without testing them first. However, the live demonstrations worked perfectly, yielding a lot of money in just a few minutes of brutal battling in the labyrinth. Watching everything while hiding behind a rock, the little fairy observes her brother working hard alongside the mechanical maid. With a sad expression, the little girl comments that the blacksmith is clearly pushing past his own limits to get the money. She feels guilty that he is doing all this just to save her, wishing she had never asked to turn back into a human. At that moment, the android interrupts her, warning that giving up on saving the little one simply is not an option for her master. The robot asks the little fairy to think about what the hero would like to hear and advises her to stop apologizing all the time. Instead of lamenting, the warrior suggests that the scout just offer a beautiful and sincere thank you for all the effort he is putting in. With that, the maid raises her arm excitedly, promising that they will give their full support to cover the reckless young man's weaknesses. Back to work, the artisan announces he will do just one more round of exhibitions and asks the two of them to handle the delivery of the items. The plan continues, and this time the boy blocks a devastating attack from a giant werewolf just to show off a shield's defense. The strategy proves to be a huge success, and the sale of that golden shield combined with various potions yields almost 2 million in profit. On another island, he attracts an entire pack of fierce wolves, running at high speed to prove the mobility of his boots. And once again, sales skyrocket, bringing in an incredible 3 million as the golden boots and stamina drinks are sold out. Shortly after, he decides to demonstrate a special pickaxe, but ends up accidentally waking a shadow monster sleeping in the rocks. Despite the unforeseen event, the sale of the pickaxes and some mysterious relics adds another 2,800,000 to the account. Exhausted but happy, the young man sets a heavy wooden box on the ground, showing the last batch of products he prepared to sell. The high-level magic scrolls sell out quickly, adding up to 10,800,000 since they came down to that floor. The scene changes completely, showing a snowstorm where a colossal ice golem walks slowly through the frozen landscape. Without missing a beat, our hero leaps from the sky holding a flaming blade, ready to face the creature and profit even more. The hero attacks the creature with his new flaming weapon and strikes the ice golem's head, generating a strong, warm light upon impact. The huge frozen creature lumbers heavily through the blizzard, while the young man holds his ground fighting on top of it. With that, the artisan lands on the ground and announces that the field test for his meteor mace was a huge success, hoping to find a buyer soon. However, the crystal monster's massive shadow covers the boy's body, revealing that the ice beast is still standing right behind him. Startled, the protagonist turns around quickly and is in disbelief upon realizing that the heavy enemy can still move freely. Wasting no time, the golem raises its giant fist and throws a devastating punch at the young man, who tries to hold up his heavy weapon to defend himself. Then, the boy senses the great danger and raises his mace with his magical gauntlets activated, trying to withstand the blow by any means. The enormous frozen fist approaches at high speed, making our hero sweat cold, knowing things just got really ugly for him. But suddenly, the android slides in and grabs her master's body, saving the kid right as the attack smashes into the ground. Far from the impact, the little fairy flies over to them, super worried, wanting to know if her beloved older brother got hurt. The maid then scolds him, saying that pushing limits is unacceptable, and the young man just scratches his head, agreeing and apologizing. The hero's little sister starts, saying that the three of them together would stand a chance, but quickly falls silent upon noticing a strong, red glare tearing through the sky. Suddenly, a huge and terrifying bolt of red energy plummets from the clouds at high speed, bringing an absurd destructive power. The brutal strike hits the ground with full force, landing right on top of the ice monster and sweeping the area with a blinding reddish light. The force of the impact generates a massive shockwave that pushes the snow away, and the three of them are left paralyzed, watching the giant beast being disintegrated. The attack leaves a colossal crater filled with boiling lava in the center, proving the dark and totally exaggerated force of that mysterious bolt. The boy breathes a sigh of relief, confessing he really thought he was a goner, and the android notices that the entire snowfield has melted. Then, a sinister dark energy begins to rise from the center of the crater, forming a large shadowy pillar that gives our hero the chills. From the intense flames emerges a gigantic and terrifying ancient hell dragon, letting out a furious roar that makes the ground shake. The system displays an insane difficulty level requiring 12 max-level players, and the mechanical maid immediately asks for orders. With the colossal monster roaring in the background, the young artisan shouts desperately for them to run away as fast as possible, because there's no way they can fight. After a lot of running, the group finds a small crevice in the rocks, and decides to take shelter inside to escape the flying beast's line of sight. Resting on the ground, the item crafter opens his screens and receives a message saying he is very lucky to stumble upon such a rare being. The voice lists the rare materials the beast drops, but the hero grumbles in annoyance, warning that he would turn to ashes in a second if he tried anything. Even knowing the danger, the person on the call notices the young man's focused look and understands he would never waste a chance to make a profit. We find out he was talking to the Knight Commander, and the platinum-haired warrior crosses his arms, asking to hear the plan. Sitting on the cold ground, the hero sighs tensely and confesses that his own idea gives him the chills with how absurd and dangerous it is. But quickly taking a very serious posture, the boy asks the knight to send an urgent warning to all the elite explorers in the area. The crazy message is to notify all the strong folks on the surface that a legendary and valuable ancient hell dragon has appeared on the snow island. The burly barbarian laughs, predicting that the rich guys will rush to hunt the beast, and the little fairy celebrates, knowing that sales are going to explode. The android raises her arm all excited, and the protagonist smiles, saying they will leave the advertising to the others while they focus on gathering resources. With that, the narrator recalls that during the gold rush, the ones who lined their pockets with money weren't the miners, but the people selling pickaxes. Then, we see our hero walking peacefully through a forest with his companions, and he comments that this time he feels in his bones that the plan was perfect. The scene changes, showing an abandoned city full of ancient ruins, covered in plants as the young artisan asks if his little sister found anything. The little fairy says the treasure should be around there, and the boy agrees, saying that this crystal skull wouldn't just show up so easily. He then explains that if they manage to find this glowing golden skull, they'll be able to craft an absurd piece of equipment and sell it for over 3 million at the auction. With things going well and the path clear, the item crafter suggests it might be a great time for them to take a break and rest a bit. But suddenly the boy's red eyes widen in shock when a strange, sharp, glowing feather falls from the sky right in front of his face. In the blink of an eye, a rain of these explosive feathers hits the ground hard, kicking up a dense curtain of dust and destroying the floor around them. The dust slowly begins to settle, revealing the base of a heavy bow striking the rocky ground, showing that the enemy is already very close. Surprised by the sudden ambush, the hero and his mechanical bodyguard look up tensely, trying to see who fired that out of nowhere. At that moment, a giant bird wing slices through the air, while a dreadful voice echoes through the scene, letting out a sinister laugh full of pure malice. Then, the terrifying bird man appears, landing in style and mocking our protagonist, while a hooded figure watches everything from the background. The winged monster draws his bow, knocking a magic arrow, and reveals he found the group easily thanks to the exaggerated rumors the boy himself spread. Full of hatred, the villain dives from the sky at high speed, yelling that this time there will be no escape, and that he is finally going to eliminate the cursed artisan. The glowing shot cuts through the wind, like a bright green missile, heading straight for the young adventurer, who doesn't even have time to try dodging. Right after, the creature fires an absurd barrage of magic arrows that fall like a veritable deadly rain on top of our item crafter. However, our protagonist doesn't show an ounce of fear and simply activates his glowing blue cube, complaining that this beast is a very persistent jerk. An intense light appears on his arm, forming a technological metallic device with blades, and the hero quickly prepares to launch his counterattack. The boy activates the shield, generating a massive whirlwind that deflects all the magic arrows and blows the startled mutant bird hard backward. At that, the hooded man finds the scene pathetic and orders the useless beast to fall back, calling for his other lackey, who answers to the name of Great Mage Ignis. The tornado's wind slowly dissipates, while the young blacksmith already draws his heavy blade, getting into a combat stance to face the next challenge. Then, a bizarre spirit with a cracked mask and a giant eye on its belly appears floating, surrounded by a very dark and purple energy. The dreadful creature recalls their last battle, swearing revenge, but guarantees that now the hero will beg for a quick and completely painless end. The bird man bursts into laughter, mocking the fancy new title the monster chose, but the apparition glares at him with a deadly look, demanding silence. Out of patience for jokes, the spirit fires a blast of purple energy that throws the idiot bird far away, proving it isn't there to play games. Showing off its new dark power, the creature warns the boy not to think it is the same weak mage as before, for now he has abandoned his humanity. With that, the villain conjures 4 huge colored magic circles around its floating body and shouts, invoking its special spirit technique. The cracked mask gets a purple glow in its eyes as the monster challenges our protagonist, wanting to see if a simple artisan can withstand its attack. Finally, 4 powerful elemental spirits shoot down from the sky like colorful meteors, going all out to crush our hero without an ounce of pity. The scary fire fairy named Salamander charges forward, leaving a trail of intense flames through the air. Right after, the wind fairy Sylphid appears with a greenish glow, ready to slice up our hero, and the water fairy Undine also enters the battle, flying quickly like a powerful magical current. Rounding out the group, the heavy earth spirit Nomus comes crashing down, showcasing the brute strength of the 4 elements. Showing no fear, the young artisan activates his glowing blue cubes as he prepares the perfect defense for that lethal attack. With this, he quickly conjures 4 colored magic shields around his body to try and block the impact. Then, the 4 elemental fairies violently collide against the barriers, generating a colossal energy explosion on the battlefield. The boy manages to neutralize the combined strike perfectly, using each shield to cancel out the enemy's corresponding element. The masked monster is completely shocked to realize its 4 base attacks were defended all at once, but it soon breaks into a sinister smile, saying that this is exactly the level of strength that makes its revenge so satisfying. Then, the floating villain raises its power to the maximum and conjures 4 more different magic circles at the same time. This time, it summons the light fairy Aurora, who shines brightly, illuminating the entire scene with blinding power. Next, the terrifying lightning spirit Electra appears, crackling with pure yellow energy all over its body. The nature fairy Dryad is also summoned, bringing a mysterious green glow to the group attack. And lastly, the bizarre and dark entity of Shadow's Lampus appears floating with an empty and terrifying look. The protagonist's little sister widens her eyes, sweating cold as she instantly recognizes that macabre figure. Trembling in panic, the little fairy points and yells, revealing that this is the exact same ghost monster that attacked her in the shop earlier. Hearing this, our hero lowers his head with an extremely serious expression as the puzzle pieces finally fall into place. He looks up full of fury and deduces that it was those 2 losers who sent the creature to hurt his sister. With fire in his eyes, the item crafter draws a bizarre whip, like sword full of sharp blades, and prepares for the worst. The mutant bird gulps hard as the boy points his weapon, swearing he is going to slice up the giant bird first. He warns that if the useless beast manages to stay intact after the strike, they might even have a friendly little chat. Desperate from the boy's killer pressure, the bird man decides it's not worth meeting his end there and tries to fly away. The cowardly bird flaps its wings to flee, abandoning the battle, while the masked mage screams furiously at his partner's betrayal. But the protagonist won't let him off the hook and calls his mechanical bodyguard, ordering her to take care of that scared little bird. The powerful android agrees immediately, and an intense yellow light begins to glow in the palm of her mechanical hand. The system reveals that the maid activated her powerful, customized light cannon, ready to fire a devastating attack. With incredible precision, the locked-on crosshairs appear in the sky, focusing perfectly on the flying villain who was trying to escape. Then, the little robot fires a massive blast of concentrated energy that crosses the sky like a destructive shooting star. The masked mage just widens its eyes in panic as the colossal beam illuminates everything and the hero's blade flies its way. The bird man widens his eyes, realizing he has no way to escape, and despair takes over his sweaty face. At that moment, the hero's blade shines brightly and hits the villain with a devastating strike, creating a massive flash of white light. The absurd force of the impact kicks up a gigantic cloud of dust and sand, covering the entire battle area. As the dust settles, the boy rests his heavy weapon on his shoulder with a confident stance, while his companions watch everything closely. Soon we see the 2 monsters lying on the ground, completely defeated and humiliated, proving they missed with the wrong person. The artisan then looks at his little sister, wanting to know exactly how those 2 goofs ended up turning into those creatures. The little fairy explains the details, and the boy takes on a very dark expression, understanding the gravity of that bizarre situation. But suddenly, a dark magical rift tears through the air right behind them, making the scout point at it completely frightened. From this bizarre energy emerges a man, laughing and admitting he chose the wrong opponent, as the difference in power was far too great. The protagonist stares at the mysterious figure, and is shocked to recognize that the guy is the dangerous rogue named Diablo.